Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, YouTube world. We're live. Just waiting for the sound to join. All right, testing 1, 2. All right, looks like we're good. Good morning, Leah and Dahlia. Good morning, Keviana. Looks like we have 19 joining us from YouTube world. Okay, so any questions on chapters 2 and 3? Anything that you read that you need some help with? Anything you want me to explain? No? Everybody good? Okay, let me get your scores for 2 and 3. Stephanie? Oh, no, that's fine. Page 133 and 134. Thank you. Micaiah? Okay. Valentina? Thank you. Nerlene? So page 133 and page 134. 133. Did you miss any? Did you get any wrong? No? Okay. Alexa? Very good. All right. So no questions on what you read, nothing you need me to explain. Tonight's homework is chapter 4. Chapter 4 is a little bit more complex. It's going to go over different body systems. There's 9 different body systems and they all kind of work together, but they each do their own job. Okay. So it can get a little bit overwhelming when you're reading chapter 4. I'm not concerned that you know what diseases affect what body systems. That's not going to be on the test. What would be on the test are normal signs of aging, because you have to know what's normal for each body system to be able to recognize abnormal. And remember, half of our job is reporting abnormal. So if we don't know what's normal, then how are you going to report something that's not normal? Because you wouldn't recognize it. So that's what I really want you to pay attention to in chapter 4. Don't get too bogged down with all of the details. Those of you who are going on for nursing, You are going to do a deep dive into anatomy and physiology. You will have to take an entire year of anatomy and physiology. So it's way, way, way more in depth than what chapter 4 covers. Chapter 4 is literally a 5th grade overview of anatomy. All right. So any questions on the principles that we've learned so far? So we learned the skill rules, which are we follow the care plan, the whole care plan, and nothing but the care plan. Every skill starts with an opening. Every opening starts with a knock. Very good. If we're going to use supplies, what do we need to put those supplies on? A barrier. Yeah. And when do we get the barrier? Okay. So it's right after the opening, after we've washed our hands, but do we get it before or after we get all of our supplies? Before. All right. We're always going to evaluate whether we need gloves. Right. So gloves aren't based on the skill, they're based on the patient. What are we going to use if the patient is uncovered or undressed? A privacy blanket. When we're getting linens, we have to be careful not to hold them against our uniform. Okay. And every skill ends the same way. But the very, very, very last step we do of the closing is wash our hands because we have to end skill with clean hands. So you guys remember all that? So that sums up last week. That's the review of last week. Today, we're going to learn a few new things. We're going to learn washing rules. We're going to learn scoot and roll. We're going to learn how to do hand and nail care. We're going to make an occupied bed and count respirations. Then at the end of class today, we're going to go over blood pressure. Blood pressure takes me about an hour and a half to teach you. It's the longest skill, the one I devote the most time to, because it's the one that's the most complex to learn. In most settings, you'll be using an automated cuff to take a blood pressure, one that you just put on the arm, press a button, it gives you numbers. That's awesome. But what would you do if that automated cuff gave you an abnormal reading? You have to double check it manually because we're not real sure whether the machine malfunctioned or whether the patient really has a problem. So we always have to make sure it's a patient problem. Does that make sense? Any questions? So we're going to learn blood pressure a little bit later. All right, so let's take a look at this review just to make sure that we have covered all of our bases here. So we're going to perform the skills as directed on the care plan. We follow the care plan, the whole care plan, and nothing but the care plan. And while we're doing those things, we're going to observe for any abnormalities, any changes, any pain, anything that stands up and says, hey, pay attention to me. I don't look right. And then who do we report all those observations to? The nurse. Okay. All right. So every skill starts with an opening. Every opening starts with a knock. Once we've knocked, what do we need to do with the patient? Greet them. We're going to greet them by name. Do we use honey, sweetie, dear, darling? No. We're going to introduce ourselves by what do they need to know about us? Yeah, name and title. Very good. We want to describe what we're there to do. And once we've described what we're going to do, we're going to get, what do we need to get from them? Permission before we put our fingers on them. Once we get their permission, what are we going to close? The curtain. And is that curtain clean? So once you close that curtain, what's the next thing you want to do? Wash your hands. After you've washed your hands, you can get your supplies. The order here matters. So if we're going to get supplies, we need a barrier. A barrier provides what kind of a place? Clean place to put our clean supplies. We only want to touch supplies with clean hands. Are you starting to see that barrier has to do with clean, right? That's our main word here with barrier. We're trying to keep everything clean. We don't want to let the supplies touch our uniform or clothing. And we want to get that barrier first before we get the rest of our supplies. We have to evaluate whether we need gloves. And this is for every single skill that we do. So what are the 3 things that would let us know that we need gloves? What if we're going to touch open wounds or non-intact skin, personal skin, and body fluids? Yeah, if we're going to touch any of those 3, we definitely need some gloves. But what if we decide we're going to wear gloves? What is the first thing those gloves should touch? The patient. That's right. Not the supplies, not the bed, not everything else, the patient. And then once we've used those gloves, we have to be aware of what our soiled gloves are touching, because you don't want to cross-contaminate, right? And then if once you've worn gloves, you have to know how to remove those dirty or soiled gloves correctly. Okay, good. All right, we also learned privacy blanket. We're going to use this anytime the patient is uncovered or undressed, right? But remember that the privacy blanket isn't just there for privacy. It's also there to keep the patient covered. That's privacy. What's the temperature like? Cold. So we want to keep the patient warm or comfortable. Yeah. Yeah. Now, do we just pull the sheet completely off the bed and then put the blanket on? No, because that exposes the patient. So how do we put a blanket on? You're going to unfold it. Don't snap it or shake it. Does it go over the sheet and then you pull the sheet down underneath, or do you take the sheet off first? Okay, it goes over the sheet and then we pull the sheet down underneath. Yep. Yep. And if we have gloves on and we're using a privacy blanket, you want to remove your gloves before you remove the blanket, because those gloves, we're going to talk about that next week, but those gloves, right, are soiled. You're going to touch that sheet. It's going to go right up next to the patient's face. So we need to remove those gloves to prevent that cross-contamination. Good. Right. So the way this works is when we start the skill, we put the blanket on and pull the sheet down underneath. When we end the skill, we pull the sheet over the blanket and pull it out from under the sheet. That way the patient is always covered. Okay. Good. All right. So we learned how to clean a basin, and for the test, we simply rinse, dry, and store. But we have a process that's ready for disinfecting if we need to. Okay. So remember, for the test, we rinse it, we set it down, we pick it up with a paper towel, dry the inside, dry the outside, and then get a paper towel to open the drawer with. We also learned the closing. We have to make sure that the environment is clean before we leave. Very good. The bed height needs to be in what position? Lowest position. What do we specifically want to ask the patient? Okay, if they need anything, but there's a word they need to hear. Comfortable. That's right. Ask about comfort. And we're going to offer a magazine as part of that emotional comfort, right? You could also ask to adjust the head of the bed, or if they need to, and I have a crossword puzzle book, TV on. I mean, it's just trying to make them comfortable, right? we want to, once we've done all that, we want to open what? What do we need to open? The curtain. Now, is that curtain clean? So what do you need to do? Wash your hands. And if we have to document, remember there's only 4 documentation skills: pulse, respirations, feeding, and drainage bag. If it's one of those skills and we have to document, we're going to document at the end after we wash our hands. And then what do we need to do again after documenting? Wash our hands again. So that was our review for the principles. Now let's see if we can remember the skills that we learned. Okay. So in order to do mouth care, what position does the patient need to be in? Fully upright. Yep. What are we going to do with the clothing while we're brushing our teeth in bed? Cover it, protect it. What do we want to do for all surfaces in the tongue? Brush. Yeah, that's what mouth care is. What do you need to do with the toothbrush before you apply the toothpaste? Wet. Yeah. And then what does the patient need to do after you've brushed their teeth? Yeah, rinse and spit. Yeah, absolutely. And then at the end, you want to make sure that their mouth and clothing is clean and dry. Very good. Very good. Let's see if we remember how to dress a resident. So we want to ask them about their clothing. Yeah, choice, preference. They get to choose what they want to wear. When do we get the clothing? Before or after we undress them? Before. We want to minimize the time that they're undressed, right? When we lift something, do we lift from above or below? Below. And you want to support at the joints. Very good. How do we remember which way to dress? You know, strong arm, weak arm. What do we undress first? What do we dress first? Yeah, undress. Yep, undress, strong arm. So together you got it. Undress, strong arm first. USA first. Undress, strong arm first, and then we're going to dress that weak arm first. Okay. We don't want to overextend or force movement, right? Remember the foot. What would we want to adjust here? So you're dressing somebody in bed. They're not standing up to pull the pants up or to make sure the shirt doesn't have wrinkles, right? So you want to adjust the clothing for appearance. Make sure everything is situated properly. Everything's lined up right. The pants are actually above the hips. And that, believe it or not, is that's a graded checkpoint, and it gets missed a lot. Because when you're dressing somebody in bed, it's really hard for them to lift their hips, especially a mannequin. So people will complete the skill with the pants down here. That's not dress. So we want to adjust that clothing. Take a minute to look at it. Right. You're going to pull the pants up as you kind of lift. But for in real life, we're just going to ask the patient to kind of turn a little, shift side to side, or if they can raise their hips, that's ideal. Everybody's going to have a little bit different level of ability. And where do the items, the soil gown go? Where does it go? In the hamper. So we're going to put all soiled items in the hamper, including the privacy blanket. Don't leave it in on the bed. You got to take it away at the end. And then which hand does the call light go in? Strong hand. Very good. Good job, guys. So let's try to remember how to do a pulse. What do we need to support when we're taking a pulse? The arm or the wrist. Very good. And our pulses are always reported over what time period? 1 full minute. Very good. 60 seconds. But we're going to follow that care plan. If the care plan tells us to count for 60 seconds, we will. They're always reported over 60 seconds. But if the care plan doesn't tell us that we have to count for that 60 seconds, if you look at the clock, there's 60 seconds. If you divide it into 4, that's 15. So if you count by for 15 seconds and multiply that by 4, you get your minute reading. We can only use that if the care plan doesn't specify 1 full minute, right? What is our normal values for pulse? 60 to 100. And we don't want to use the flat areas of our fingers. What do we want to use? The fingertips. Yeah. And what finger can you not use to take a pulse? Thumb. All right. The radial pulse is located where? Where do you find a radial pulse? In the wrist, at the top part of the thumb side of the wrist. Yeah. If you put your fingers down here, you actually might find a pulse. There's another little artery that runs there. That's called the ulnar. U-L-N-A-R. I can't say it today. Ulnar pulse. But it's very deeper. It's a smaller artery, harder to feel. And that's not the one that our care plan tells us to use. Remember, we have to follow the care plan. So the care plan says radial. Make sure you're on the radial because that counts. Okay. You want to say start and stop for timing. And in Florida, you're going to count with both evaluators. What do you have to do if you count something? What is an important step here? If you count it, it's in your brain, and that doesn't do me any good. So if you count something, where do you have to put it? You got to write it down. You got to put it in the chart somewhere. You've got to document. Remember, if you count something, there is no busy work in CNA. No busy work. Right? I'm not going to give you something just to keep you busy. You've got way more than you can do to keep you busy. There is no busy work. If I tell you I need a pulse reading, I actually need that pulse reading for something. I'm either going to give a medication, or I'm evaluating the effectiveness of a medication, or I'm trying to decide if the patient can get up and walk, or if they can go to a medical test. There's a reason I need that number, right? So if I tell you, go take a pulse, and you do, you go take the pulse, but it stays in your brain and you don't write it anywhere and you don't tell me, did that help? No, you know the pulse, that's great, but you don't make decisions. You got to make sure that you write it down. Otherwise, it's kind of like it never even happened. Right? All right, so good. You ready to learn some new skills? So anybody lost yet? Anybody lost? All right, so let's go to page 82. How do we know what to do with each patient? Care plan. Our care plan at the top of the page up here says provide hand and nail care to 1 hand. Well, what if the patient has 2? Yeah, we don't care. Don't care. Don't care if they have 2. We're going to do what that care plan says. It says the patient is sitting in a chair at the bedside and can move as directed. So yay, this becomes super easy. All we're going to do is put 1 hand in a basin, let it soak, take it out, and wash it. We're going to put it back in the basin to rinse and take it out to dry it. Then we're going to clean under the nails, file any rough edges, apply some lotion, wipe off the excess, and clean up. That's the skill. Now, the reason that you're doing this skill is actually important. I got some comments here. Hold on 1 second. Oh, thank you, Mom. Oh, Cynthia is viewing from Brooklyn on her way to work. Nice. Welcome. All right. So let me explain to you why we're doing hand and nail care. When you have a patient, well, let me, when you have somebody that is active at home, not in healthcare, they're just citizens, right? So you guys, when your nails grow long, you probably use nail clippers to trim them down, file them so you don't scratch yourself and move on with your life. Or you might call up your favorite nail salon and have a nice little mani done, right? But you address your fingernails. You don't just let them grow willy-nilly, right? Something has to be done with them. They have to be trimmed or filed or something, right? Now, most of the time for us, we let our nails grow until they start to annoy us, and then we use nail clippers to trim them. But there's actually a better way. If once or twice a week, you just took a nail file and filed your nails down, you'd never, ever have to actually cut them because you would be keeping them low using a file rather than a sharp instrument. Make sense? That is what nail care is about. It's preventative maintenance, keeping the patient's nails shorter using a file on a regular basis rather than nail clippers, which can accidentally cut the skin. Okay. CNAs do not use nail clippers. They're advanced pieces of medical machinery you're not allowed to touch. And I know it sounds ridiculous because you have them at home. But the problem is that when you're cutting your nails, you'll be really careful not to cut your skin. When you're cutting somebody else's, it is really easy to accidentally cut the skin. Does that make sense? We're going to learn with diabetes a little bit later in the program, why that would be a bad idea. So what we're doing here for this skill really is designed to keep the underside of the nails clean, right? Because stuff builds up there, especially if your patient isn't going to the sink and washing their hands on a regular basis. And keeping the nails at a manageable length so they don't scratch you or the patient or somebody else. So this is preventative maintenance. Good. But this is our first washing skill. So we have to learn washing rules. So just like all the other principles that we've learned, these have some rules that we have to follow. Now I had created flashcards for the class, and I've got a set up there. I had created flashcards for, and I sell them online and, different places. I just redid the flashcards since our last class. So, because I needed to order them, and I've got a whole brand new format for the flashcards. And I think you guys are really going to like it. You know how we just had the banners with the fill in the blanks? Those are in the flashcards. Okay. So it allows you to kind of test yourself. But it also, for these principles, it lists the skills that these principles are used in. So washing rules, we're going to use with hand and nail care, and with foot care, and with partial bed bath, and with peri-care, and with catheter care. So 5 skills are going to use this one principle. It's pretty big. It's pretty important. And I've got to spend a little bit of time explaining all of the different steps of washing rules. Okay. So the first thing that we have to remember when we're going to wash something is that basins are no soap zones. We don't put soap in the water. And a lot of you are going to want to do that because it's kind of where your mind goes. You pour a bubble bath in a bathtub, right? But the problem is that when you put soap in the water, you now have nothing to rinse with. There's no way to rinse. Now, what happens if we leave soap on the surface of a skin without rinsing it off? Anybody know what happens? It makes the skin super itchy because that soap dries. It will also dry out the skin itself. So leaving soap on the surface of a skin is never a good idea. So we've got a principle here. Whatever we wash, we rinse. Whatever we rinse, we dry. So because rinsing is a specific check-off item, we can't have soap in our water because we have to be able to rinse. Now, some of you are saying, well, why don't I just get 2 basins then? One to wash and one to rinse. Has anyone ever been a patient at a hospital? Did you get a bill? You got a bill, because healthcare isn't free, is it? You got a bill. Now, what made up that bill was your room and your board and the medical care you got, but also every single supply that was used in the care of you was billed. Those basins are about $30. So how many of you guys would just have enough money to just throw an extra $30 out? I don't, absolutely not. Not when you don't need to, right? So this is the example that I give for hospital bills. Imagine you go to a restaurant after class today, just pick a restaurant, any restaurant, and okay, Chili's, and there's no menus. No menus. You go in, you sit down, and they say, yeah, we're going to bring you what we think you need. So they bring you whatever it is that they want to give you. And you have no idea how much it's going to cost. No clue. And they're not telling you. No clue. So you are going to eat whatever they bring you. Now, I am not a big seafood person. So if they bring me shrimp pasta, I'm probably not going to eat it, and I'm probably not going to like it, but they're not going to tell me how much it is. And when I get the bill, I have to pay it. That is healthcare. You get no say. You go into a hospital, they give you whatever it is they think you should have. They never tell you what it's going to cost. And when the bill comes, you have to pay it. That is healthcare. So we have to be aware as CNAs, because we're going to be giving the patient a lot of these patient use items. And we have to be aware of the cost, excuse me, involved that's passed on to the patient. So a good example of this, one of the hospitals that I worked at a million years ago, they were noticing that on this one unit, toothbrushes were just like disappearing. I mean, the kind of cheap toothbrush things, right? They were just like, I mean, they were ordering toothbrushes, and where are all these toothbrushes going? Well, it turns out that the CNA that was working there was using the toothbrush once and throwing it away. Every single patient, every single day. Well, those toothbrushes were being billed out at like $10 a piece. So can you imagine a 7-day stay and $70 of it are toothbrushes? Right? So we have to be aware of the costs. Another one that's really encountered often are bedpans. Bedpans are plastic items. They are only assigned to one person. So if she needs a bedpan, we go get it from the supply cabinet, scan it out, and it's hers. It's not going to be passed around from person to person. It is only hers. But there are CNAs that will throw the bedpan away after every use. I mean, that's like $40. Can you imagine $40 every time you had to go to the bathroom? So what we do, when all you have to do is clean it, right? So what we do as CNAs is going to have a direct impact on the cost of healthcare to that patient. Does that make sense? Good. So this is interesting to me. One of the fastest growing segments of nursing, right? So if you go to school to become a nurse, one of the fastest growing jobs for nurses is reviewing the itemized bill and disputing charges. So like if you get a bill for $100,000 from the hospital, you can bring it to me and I'll go through and I'll tell you what could have been handled a different way. It is a disputable charge, right? And then you can go back to the hospital and say, hey, I'm not paying for this. And if we're successful, you're going to give me a part of what I saved you. Isn't that crazy? It's crazy that this is even a job. And that's just crazy to me. Absolutely crazy. But we as CNAs need to be aware of this, because you guys want to be paid for your work. And you want to be paid pretty well, right? It's not an easy job. You want to be paid pretty well. So if CNAs are causing a huge amount of charges on bills that are being disputed and have to be written off, then that means the hospital has to pay for all of those items. Do you think they're going to have any money left in their budget to give you guys a raise? So we've got to be, this has an impact on you. Does that make sense? So using 2 basins is not a good option, and you don't need it. 1 basin is fine. Wet the washcloth, wring it out. We don't like whippy, drippy, wet washcloths. Wring it out, and then apply soap to the washcloth. Now you still have water to rinse with. Make sense? So basins are no soap zones. Now, when we're going to go get water, let's think about this, right? If we're going to do hand and nail care, we have to do our opening. Hi, Miss Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. I'm here to do hand care. Is that okay? I'm going to close your curtain, wash my hands, go get my barrier, put it on the table, go get my supplies, put that on the barrier. Now I'm ready to get the water. I've washed my hands and all I've touched are clean items. So I'm going to take this basin over to the sink. Can I turn that faucet on with my bare hands? No. So what would I use to turn the faucet on? A paper towel. So I'm going to use a paper towel to turn the water on, and I'm going to feel it with the inside of my wrist. It should feel warm, not hot, not cold, just warm. And I'm going to put some water in the basin. Doesn't have to be a lot of water, but I'm going to put some water in the basin and use a paper towel to turn the faucet off. But just because I think the water is comfortable doesn't mean my patient is going to agree. We all have different preferences when it comes to bathing water. Me, I like the water hot enough to remove skin. I like steamy, hot water. My husband hates hot water. He prefers his showers on the cooler side, right? So we all have different preferences with water temperature. So just because you like it at a certain temperature doesn't mean your patient is going to agree. Does that make sense? But there's another problem here. There's another problem. And that has to do with the changes of aging. So this is on page 80. Remember, I told you I took the notes for you. So if you look at page 81, at the top of the page, you'll see a cross section of skin. You've got skin, you've got fat, you've got muscle, and you've got blood vessels that are kind of buried under there that you can't see real well because all of those layers are nice and thick. They're plump. But as we age, those layers shrink down. And if you look at the middle picture, you can see that those areas are a little bit thinner. Now, as we go through the aging process, we actually lose that layer of fat in our extremities. Have you ever seen an old person's arm? It's like skin over bone, and you can actually see the blood vessels. I mean, really see them. They look like ropes under the skin. So if I don't have those and an older person does have those, that means that things changed between middle age and older age. And what changes is we lose that layer of fat. Now, that's way more important than you think it is. way more important, because that fat does two things. It retains heat and blocks out external temps. Okay, so let me explain to you retain heat. If you bake something in the oven, let's say we're baking a pie at 350 degrees. Okay, so we put the pie in the oven, it cooks for however long it needs to cook, and we take it out. It is hot. You can't even touch it with your hands. You have to use pot holders because it's hot, right? So you put it on top of the stove. Now, what do you think air temperature is, just general room temperature? What do you guys think? Okay, let's go easy. Let's make this an easy number. Let's say 75. Okay, so 75, that's a good normal room temperature. Right here, right now, it's cold in here, I know. I'm gonna turn the air off. But let's say room temperature is 75 degrees, right? So you take that 350 degree pie out of the oven and put it on top in 75 degree air. What's going to happen to that pie? It's going to cool off. Yeah. And eventually it's going to cool off to 75 degrees because room temperature always wins. Always. Room temperature always wins. Remember that. Room temperature always wins. Now, that pie will never get down into 40 degrees if that room temperature is 75. It'll never get cooler than room temperature, right? So let's take something out of the refrigerator. Let's say that we have some cheese in the refrigerator. We take it out. Now that cheese is probably 36, 37 degrees in the refrigerator. Put it on the counter. What is going to happen to that cheese? It's going to warm up because room temperature always wins. Does that make sense? Do you guys get that principle? Room temperature always wins. Now, why is this important? Why am I even talking about this? Why are we talking about pies and cheese other than the fact that I'm hungry? What temperature are you guys? If you took your temperature about, it's a range. Okay, so 98.6 is kind of our benchmark. The 97.6 to 99.6 is considered normal. Let's just make this easy math and make it 98. Okay. So room temperature is about 75. Our bodies are about 98. And what did I say room temperature always does? Yeah, room temperature always wins. So hold up. If we are 98 degrees and room temperature always wins, that is a physics principle. That means that we have to continuously generate heat to stay at 98 degrees. That is the main reason you eat. People think they eat for nutrition, and you do, but by the process of digestion, that creates heat, and that heat is what keeps you at a living temperature. Because here's the thing. If you drop down below 95 degrees, you can die. Room temperature always wins. So that means that your body has to work really hard to keep you at 98 degrees. Because remember, there's a very little margin of error here. Below 95, you can die. That's hypothermia. Below 92, you are dead. That's a very small window when I'm telling you that room temperature always wins. Now, if you walked outside and it was 98 degrees, you're saying, oh my gosh, it's hot, it's hot, it's hot. But yet if you reach over and touch her, she is 98 degrees sitting there, right? So our perception of temperature is a little bit skewed. We have to remember that the body burns calories to create heat, to keep us at a living temperature because it's always fighting against room temperature. Now, thankfully, you've got a layer of fat. And when your body burns calories to create this heat, that layer of fat holds that heat in. So your body doesn't have to work quite so hard to keep that temperature steady. But what do you think is going to happen when that layer of fat goes away? That's right. Your body has to generate more heat because more of it is radiating away. So that means that more of our calories that we take in are going to go toward heat production than nutrition. Does that make sense? So that layer of fat is super important at keeping our body at a steady temperature, but it's also important for blocking out external temperatures. So if I'm standing outside and it's 98 degrees, that room temp, remember, outside temperature always wins. So that's trying to heat me up, right? If I step outside and it's 40 degrees, that outside temperature is trying to cool me down. So that layer of fat helps provide a buffer so that outside temperature has less impact on my internal temperature. Have you ever heard an older person say, I can't handle the cold anymore? That's why they've lost their buffer. And that's a very real thing. This is why a lot of people retire to Florida, okay? Because their bodies don't have to work so hard to maintain that temperature. Have you ever walked into grandma's house and you're like, oh my gosh, grandma, it's like 90 degrees in here. It's so hot. Yeah, so hot. And grandma's sitting there in a sweater. And you're like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Well, it's because they don't have the ability, they don't have the buffer, right, between room temperature and their internal temperature. So by keeping the temperature higher, their body doesn't have to work so hard.
I remember when I used to work at a assisted living facility, every room I would go into used to be so hot. And I was like, why is it so hot in here?
Yeah. And a lot of older people, even though it's hot, will still wear a sweater because they don't have the same perception of temperature that you do. Does that make sense? Okay, so if we know that this layer of fat goes away as we age, and we know that that's going to affect not only our own temperature, but how we perceive other temperatures. When we get water, we are feeling it through skin that has a wetsuit, right? Because we still have our layer of fat. We have a protective mechanism. So when we feel that water temperature on the inside of our wrists, we can't assume that the patient is going to interpret the water temperature the same way we do. So what do you think we need to do if we get water?
Ask the patient if it's comfortable.
Yep, ask the patient to check the water temperature. That is a graded checkpoint, and it is super important. Super important. And it's all because of what I just explained to you. Okay, good? Makes sense? All right, so to recap, basins are no soap zones. We don't put soap in the water. We're going to put soap on the washcloth. We're always going to control the washcloth too, bring it out really well so it's not drippy, and control it so it doesn't have flappy edges everywhere. You want to get a paper towel to turn your water on, check the temperature, make sure it's warm, not hot, not cold, just warm. Paper towel to turn the faucet off, and then ask the patient to check the water. Is it okay? Now, if they say, oh, no, it's too cold, don't argue with them. Go warm it up. If they go, oh, no, that's too hot, don't argue with them. Go cool it down. Don't try to convince them that they're wrong. Okay. Probably one of the worst cases, this was horrible. I was sitting at a nurse's station and I hear this blood curdling scream from the shower room, and I'm thinking somebody fell. I get up, I go into the shower room, and this, completely undressed woman sitting in a shower chair is kicking and hitting and just shrieking, at the top of her lungs. And I'm like, what is going on? And there's a lot of steam in the room, and she's just yelling. And the CNA is trying to push her under the water. And I'm like, hold up, stop. And I, kind of got everybody to calm down, turn the water off. And I asked the patient what's going on. And she's like, it's hot. And the CNA's like, it's fine. Okay, your patient is telling you it's hot. They're kicking and scratching and hitting. They're screaming. And all of that you decided to overlook because you thought the water was okay? Help isn't help if it doesn't help, right? That didn't help the patient. So we have to make sure that we're listening to what they're telling us. And that means that we have to ask and be open to their input. Does that make sense? Whatever we wash, we rinse. Whatever we rinse, we dry. Don't forget the rinse. That is the number one step that is missed on washing skills. People forget to rinse. We don't want to get our surface wet. So we're always protecting our surface, either with a barrier or a towel or something. You don't want the surface to get wet. And then if we're going to apply lotion, we're going to put the lotion in our hands and warm it up first. Wipe it on, whatever we're going to put it on, and then use a towel to remove the excess. Because lotion, if I put lotion on my hand, some of it's going to sink in, but whatever doesn't sink in is just going to lay there because the skin is now saturated. There's nowhere for it to go. If I leave lotion on my hand and go to pick up a cup of hot coffee, what's going to happen? Yeah, so that's a safety step. Safety steps count big.
Also, like if you're after you bathe the patient and you were to dress them, you put lotion on them. If you leave excess lotion on, wouldn't that leave like a moist area?
Yes, warm, dark, moist.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It can also stain the clothing. Yeah. So anything that we apply lotion to, we remove the excess with a towel at the end. So there's one more step here, and it's called leaves method. We're going to save that until another skill a little later on in the program. You now know 99% of washing rules. Just remember there is one more that we're going to go over a little later in the program. So does that make sense? Everybody understand that? So for this skill, we're going to go get water, have the patient check it, have them put their hand in the basin. How many hands are we washing? Just one. We're going to take it out and put it on a towel to wash. We're going to put it back in the basin to rinse. Then we're going to take it out and dry it on that towel. Then we're going to take an orange stick. Now, an orange stick is one of those. Actually, threw mine away. Let me look. Hold on. Ah, there we go. Okay. An orange stick is one of these guys. Some of you call them cuticle sticks or manicure sticks, right? It's one of these guys. We are going to use this end, the slanted end, the beveled end. And we're going to take that in underneath the edge of the nail, circle it around to get any debris out. And then we're going to wipe that on the towel before we go to the next nail. Because you don't want to take this dirt and put it under this nail. That'd be kind of gross. So we would put it underneath the edge of the nail, circle it around, wipe. Clean under the nail, circle around, wipe. Clean under the nail, circle around, wipe. Circle around, wipe. Now, when you file nails, this is different than the way you file yours. I just lost a nail this morning. So I took an emery board and I went back and forth like this to file the nail. Right? We can't do that with elderly patients because nails become very brittle. elderly nails become very brittle. And when you go back and forth, what that does is it pushes and pulls that nail, and it will split right up the middle if it's brittle. So instead of doing that, we're going to take the emery board and just go in one direction, not back and forth, because that creates longitudinal stress. We're just going to go one direction toward the middle. And then we can take it right off the middle, one direction. The biggest thing is don't go back and forth. Don't seesaw. Okay. These will be thrown away at the end of the skill. These are single-use items. Okay, good. Then we're going to take some lotion, warm it up in our hands, apply it to the hand that we just cleaned, wipe it off with lotion or with the towel, wipe the lotion off with the towel, and then we're going to clean everything up. Okay, so throw away our throwaways, put our linens in dirty linen, throw our barrier away, clean our basin. We're going to clean everything up. Then we'll do our closing. Thank you very much. Is there anything else I can get for you? Are you comfortable? Would you like a magazine? Here's your call light. Open the curtain, wash your hands, think about the steps of your skill and make any corrections, and then tell the evaluator your skill is done. This is a longer skill. If you look at the bottom of page 82, you'll see that this skill may take somebody with your level of experience as many as 11 minutes to do. That's a little bit longer. Guys, we're washing one hand, right? That's it, just one. So this is a little bit longer skill, but it's a good way to demonstrate that you understand all of these washing principles that we went over. So this does show up on a couple of different checklists. Okay, good. Any questions on washing rules? No? All right, I'm going to show you the video for this one because it does have good close-ups of actually cleaning underneath the nails. You will have a little bit, starting on Wednesday, you will have a little bit of practice time at the end of the class. Not today, because today we have blood pressure. You will be practicing blood pressure on each other at the end. But starting on Wednesday, you'll have a little bit of time built in at the end of class for practice. Next week, you'll have a little bit more time, and the following week, you'll have even more time. So by the fourth week, you've got about an hour and a half of practice time built in. You also have this room available to you on Mondays and Wednesdays from 1 p.m. when you leave, or, when class is over, up until 4 to be able to practice. So if you wanted to make a friend and stay after class, you can stay here and practice the skills. After you graduate, you can still come in and practice on Mondays and Wednesdays from 1:30 until 4. And that's on the back of your ID badge. It says practice one. So these are our checkpoints for hand and nail care. We're going to support the wrist and arm at all times. We're going to soak the hand in water. Whenever we wash, we rinse. Whenever we rinse, we dry. We're going to place the hand on the towel. Use a beveled edge to clean under the nails. We're going to wipe the orange stick between the nails. Use an emery board to file in one direction toward center. And we'll apply lotion last. So these are the checkpoints specific to this skill. Okay, so remember your book says that you have up to 11 minutes to do this skill. I'm getting it done in 6.5. And that's with the whole intro and the credits.
Hello,
Hi, Mr. Jones. My name is Patti. I'm your CNA today. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Wonderful. I need to do hand and nail care on one hand. Is that okay?
Yes.
I'm gonna close your curtain for privacy. Let me go wash my hands and then I'll gather my supplies.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna start with a barrier. So I'll place a barrier on the table and that will give me a place to set your clean supplies. And then I'm going to gather a basin, soap, and lotion. An orange stick and emery board. Two washcloths. And a towel. I'm gonna go get some water in the basin.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Jones, would you like to check the water temperature, make sure it's okay? Is it good?
Yes.
Okay, you can submerge your hand in there if you'd like,
Okay.
and I'll bring that tray a little bit closer to you. Is that comfortable?
Yes.
I'm gonna place the washcloths in here, and we'll wet one of the washcloths and use it to get your hand wet. Now I'm gonna place your hand over here on the towel. Apply soap to the washcloth. And now I'm gonna wash all surfaces of your hands, including in between the fingers, in this area between the thumb and the forefinger. I'm gonna turn your hand over now and wash the palm of your hand. Now we're gonna place your hand back in the basin to rinse. Okay, I'm gonna bring your hand over here to dry. I'm gonna dry between the fingers. And I'm gonna turn your hand over and dry the palm of the hand as well. Okay. Now we'll take the orange stick and I'm gonna clean under each nail. Just cleaning the edge. Does that hurt?
Yeah.
We'll wipe the orange stick on a towel in between each finger. And now I'm going to file any rough edges. So I'll file from the outer edge to the middle. Checking each nail for any rough edges. And now we can apply lotion. So I'll get a little lotion, warm it up in my hands, and apply it to all surfaces of the hand. That feel good?
Yes.
Okay. Now we'll wipe off the lotion. How's that?
Great.
Wonderful. I'm going to place my soiled linens in dirty linen container and then clean up my workspace. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, on the way, we'll pick up the soap and the lotion and place them in the basin. We'll use the paper towel to open the door, place the basin in. These items will get thrown away. Okay, Mr. Jones, are you comfortable?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I offer you a magazine?
No, ma'am.
Is there anything else I can get for you while I'm here?
No, thank you.
Okay, your call line is right there. Please use it to call me if you have a need. I'm going to open your curtain and wash my hands. After washing my hands, I'll review the steps of my skill, make any corrections, and then tell the evaluator my skill is done. It's not too bad, right? Any questions on that one? So later on in the program, we're going to learn foot care. Foot care is hand and nail care, just a little lower, but we're not going to do anything with the nails. So it's actually even easier other than being on the floor. Okay. So any questions on hand and nail care? All right, let's go to page 61 for a minute. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. But it's a question that comes up quite a bit. Do you have to use medical abbreviations on the state exam? And the answer is kinda. There will be a few on the written test, but they're not going to ask you what does ADLs mean. But they may say, you know, a CNA is primarily responsible for developing the care plan, performing ADLs on patients, diagnosing diseases, or making elaborate meals. You know, so if you don't know what ADLs are, it would be hard to answer that question. Does that make sense? So I have a whole activity here on page 61, 62, and 63 that goes over some basic medical abbreviations and gives you a little activity to kind of put it all in perspective, you know, to try it out. But there's a few that you do need to know. So we're going to go down that first column. You might want to just put like a little dot next to the ones that I'm going to tell you. So on page 62, the first column, these are the ones that you do need to know. PRN, the very first one. Now, the reason you need to know PRN is because it's going to be on the care plan quite a bit. PRN means as needed. Now, some of you are like, wait a minute, how in the world does PRN mean as needed? No words go together to make that. That's because this is abbreviated Latin, not English. And if you try to make sense of it in English, it's probably not going to make sense. About half of the medical abbreviations we use are abbreviated Latin, not English. The other half are abbreviated English, which really confuses things.
Any specific reason or just?
Yes, there is actually. So when do you think medicine was invented? Long time ago. I mean, way back in ancient Egypt, they were doing medical things, right? So medicine has been around like since the Neanderthals. Well, back in the 13, 14, 1500s, medieval type time periods, people started going to university to learn medicine, right? But people in France were going to French universities. People in England were going to England universities. People in Germany were going to German universities. People in China were going to Chinese universities, right? They didn't like all go to one place. They were different, but they were all making discoveries. Well, they had to have a way to communicate those discoveries to each other. And they only had one language in common. Do you know what that language was? Latin. because Latin was something that you learned in university, and it is considered the language of medicine because most science is rooted in Latin because it's a language in common. Does that make sense? So a lot of these are going to be abbreviated Latin. So if you keep going down, BID means twice a day. Well, how in the world does BID mean twice a day? Well, B actually stands for bi. How many wheels does a bicycle have? 2, right? We look at bicycle, the name bicycle, and we think, a bike, 2-wheeled thing. But that word bicycle actually means 2 wheels. So instead of calling it a bicycle, it's a 2-wheel. Does that make sense? So what do you think T might stand for? If B stands for bi, which is 2, tri. So a triangle has how many corners? 3. QID, Q stands for quad, which is 4.
All these ones that we know as well.
Yeah, you do need to know the frequencies, yes. Now, that's the only time you're going to see Q meaning 4. And in fact, that one isn't used in medicine much anymore at all. Because every other time we see a Q, it doesn't stand for 4. It actually means every. Q stands for quaque, which is every. So QD would be every day. Q2H is every 2 hours, right? So that Q stands for every. QAM would be every morning. QPM is every evening. Got it? Any questions on that? You do need to know frequency because they're going to show up on care plans. It may say patient out of bed to chair BID. Twice a day. Yep. It may say patient assisted to bathroom PRN as needed. Yep. Does that make sense? So you do need to know these because they probably will show up on care plans in your career. Now, the next section, which is daily activities, well, that's what we do. So we kind of need to know these as well. Ad lib just means as they wish. As they wish. So patient out of bed ad lib means whenever they want to get up. We do everything in our lives ad lib. A&O means alert. This is a English, abbreviated English. It means alert and oriented. You are all A&O. You are alert and you are oriented. If you were confused, you would not be A and O. Does that make sense? ADLs, we need to know. That's what we do, activities of daily living. And then going down a little bit more, I and O, NPO, and PPE. Those are ones that you need to know. Now, I's and O's are intake and output. When somebody is in healthcare, a patient, we usually track how much fluid they take in and how much fluid comes out because it does have an impact on fluid balance, basically. So you would, if your patient is on I's and O's, that means we have to count every bit of fluid that goes in and we have to count every bit of fluid that comes out. NPO means nothing by mouth. Let me tell you a story about this. So, we have the scrub shop and I have people that I've, worked with for years and years and years that come and shop here. And there was this one, she works down in Tampa at a big hospital down there. And she comes up, we'll call her Kathy. She worked in the cath lab. And she comes up to me. She says, I have got a story for you. You're not going to believe this. And I said, okay, try me. She said, I went into work the other day. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning, go upstairs to get my first patient for the first cardiac cath case. And the patient is sitting in bed eating. And I'm like, before a cardiac cath? She said, yes. So this is the conversation that she relayed to me. She says, I went up to the nurse and asked, why is the patient eating? The nurse says, oh, that patient has a student nurse today. Let me go get the student nurse. So Kathy goes up to the student nurse and says, why is my patient eating? Student nurse says, the patient's in PO. Kathy says, I know the patient's in PO. Why is the patient eating? And the student nurse says, well, I went and got the tray special. Kathy says, you went and got the tray special. The patient is in PO. Student nurse says, I know. Kathy says, what do you think NPO means? Student nurse says, nanas, pineapples, and oranges. Went and got the tray made special. So now we have a very serious situation because we have a patient who needed a cardiac cath done who cannot have it done, which means that they are at risk for a cardiac event. We have a doctor who is waiting for a patient to perform a cardiac cath on, and now that doctor has to be told, no patient. They are losing money. Do you think that made him happy? Absolutely not. So this had catastrophic consequences, all because a student nurse did not ask, what does NPO mean? Tried to make it up. Nanas, not even bananas. I'm like, are you kidding me? Nanas, pineapples, and oranges, a fruit tray. If you don't know what it means, ask. Ask. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. So NPO does not mean nanas, pineapples, and oranges. It does mean nothing by mouth or nota per aura. Okay. Good. And then PPE, we actually talked a little bit about that one when we talked about transmission-based precautions. Remember, personal protective equipment. You do need to know what PPE means because it may show up on the state exam. It is relevant to CNAs. The rest of those are just good for you to have a general understanding of, but you probably won't see them on the state exam. Good? But if you do the activity on page 63, it'll help you kind of apply those medical terminology or medical abbreviations to real world situations, where you would actually see it. And speaking of activities, go to page 32. We're going to cover this a little bit more later today, but we already learned pulse. Do you guys remember pulse? 60 to 100 was normal. So if you're looking on page 32, there's at the very top of the first column a little chart of normal vital signs. You'll see normal temperature, which we covered today, 97.6 to 99.6. We've already learned normals for pulse, 60 to 100. Today, we're going to learn respirations. Normals are 12 to 20, and blood pressure. So this activity is very useful for you after class today. If you go through all of the different clipboards there on page 33 and figure out which ones to report to the nurse, it's a good way to apply the knowledge that you just gained. Okay. Good. I have lots of ways for you guys to be able to study. All right, so let's go ahead and take our break. Come back at 20 till, and that'll give you almost 15 minutes. Okay. And then we're going to get into making an occupied bed and respiration. So go ahead and take your break.
You have a moment, Miss Patti?
Yes, I was actually gonna have
I wanted to show you something. You're okay. Anything I can do for you?
No, I had, interview person. I'm planning on that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So just to clarify on the keys.
Well, but I think the back door key is the same from the doors.
No.
Mine is.
Well, it's this, yeah, it's also the same key that unlocks all three doors, but it's not the same key as the front door.
Right. So they would be a front and back.
In office. 1 bridge. And how many copies of each?
Just one.
Just one, okay.
This is for the. That's accessories. Just to kind of,
Brighten it up.
yeah, and
We need to get some more, like marketing displays and signage from manufacturers. We do all of our signage next door. That's sometimes since I've done it.
store department slap offs.
We're talking flat wall signs. One of each. Yes. If you need anything else, let me know. I'll go and get these taken care of and you got it from.
Just remember my mom.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think she's got the punch. She can get him.
What's that? I'm gonna check my board for you. 208.
Ooh, water girl. Drink some water. You on a sliding scale?
Yeah. Well, I switched doctors, so, my previous doctor, I was on insulin pump, saved my life because I was doing terrible with like, I call it the old fashioned way
Mm-hmm.
with the syringe and vial. And, when I switched doctors, that 3-month gap, you know, you go every 3 months, my previous doctor wouldn't refill my, prescription for my insulin pump. So I had to go back to the old way, so my blood sugars have been out of whack. And it was my new doctor, I had to explain to her, you know, that I get it from a third party provider, insurance, or pharmacy. So now it has to go through her, which took weeks, and then it has to go be prior authorized, like through the insurance. So now I'm still waiting.
Oh my
It's been months.
gosh. Oh,
That's why my blood sugar is.
all over the place. Yeah.
If you look on here, it's like, it does this up, down, up, down.
You're very brittle.
Very good.
Mhm.
Not bad.
How long have you been diabetic?
Since I was 21 and I'll be 35 this year. I didn't develop it until after I had my son. I
Mm.
had gestational, and they told me I had a greater chance of developing it at an older age. And then 2 years later, I remember I got really sick. I had like double infection, bronchitis. It was like, and it attacked my pancreas, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
So
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a lot to try to handle, and you know, especially with a new child too.
yeah,
You're still getting used to parenting, and you know, throw all that on top of it. Wow.
it's so fun. It wasn't fun. Now it's just dealing with it every day.
Yeah. Okay, so our next skill is making an occupied bed. This is going to be on page 100 of your skills book. Feel free to take care of whatever you need to. All right, so this skill, make an occupied bed. The care plan at the top of the page gives us our specific instructions for this patient. Remember, care plans are specific to each patient. So this care plan says change the top sheet, bottom sheet, and pillowcase while the resident remains in bed. Now, in a perfect world, we're going to wait until the patient gets out of bed, because you can make a bed with nobody in it a whole lot quicker than you can make a bed with somebody in it, right? So in a perfect world, we would wait till people are out of bed. So if you walk by a bed and it isn't currently occupied, you should automatically think, hey, wait, do those linens need to be changed? Take advantage of it. Because patients, even bedbound patients, usually get out of bed for showers, right? We put them on a stretcher and take them to the shower room for showers. Or in an acute care setting, they may get out of bed for tests, to go to different departments. So even bedbound patients are out of bed occasionally. So if you walk by a bed that's empty, you should automatically think, hey, do those sheets need to be changed? Make sense? But there are situations here and there, now and then, where we do find ourselves having to change the sheets while the patient is in bed. This skill is showing that we have that skill, that we can do that if necessary. But remember that this is a big amount of stress on the patient, because they have to scoot and they have to roll and they have to move. And if you've got somebody who doesn't have a lot of energy, this can sap them pretty quick. Make sense? So our care plan says that we're going to change the top sheet, bottom sheet, and pillowcase. Now it goes on to say, if that wasn't clear enough, right? Top sheet, bottom sheet, pillowcase. Remember, we follow the care plan, the whole care plan, and nothing but the care plan. So the rest of this should be pretty self-explanatory. It says a bedspread, blanket, draw sheet, or underpad is not required for this skill. So top sheet, bottom sheet, pillowcase. That's it. That's all we're doing here. We're not doing bed spreads. We're not doing pads. We're not putting a draw sheet on. We're not doing any of that. Just top sheet, bottom sheet, pillowcase. So they really are making this as simple as possible for you. Okay. Well, let's go back a page to 99 and talk about what a draw sheet is. Because we do use these in healthcare, so it's important for you to know what they are. A draw sheet is a flat sheet, a top sheet, just like this, that's folded in half lengthwise. So skinny way, folded in half, and then it's put on the bed across the mattress, underneath the patient, and then the ends are tucked in. So you can actually see it there on page 99, a drawing. That would be where a draw sheet goes. The top folded edge is going to go around the shoulders. The bottom edge, where the two pieces come together, is going to end right about mid-thigh. You can use this sheet like a sling to scoot a patient towards you, to move them up in bed, to transfer them to a stretcher. It becomes a sling that stays on the bed. Okay. Good. Now, draw sheets are not used if they're not needed. The reason is that wrinkles contribute to bed sores. We're going to get into that a little bit more in an upcoming lesson. Just kind of keep that in mind. Wrinkles contribute to bed sores. So when we have a draw sheet underneath the patient, that folded edge under the shoulders is a wrinkle. The two edges that come together underneath the legs is a wrinkle. So wrinkles contribute to bed sores. So if we don't need a draw sheet, we shouldn't be using one. Does that make sense? Some people put a draw sheet on every single bed. It's not necessary. It's a waste of resources, but more importantly, it's going to put your patient at risk. Okay, good. But that shows you, page 99 shows you what a draw sheet is, how it's used on the bed. And the picture at the bottom of page 99 shows you how the draw sheet can be used as a sling to lift a patient and transfer them. So if you go back to page 100, let's go back to that care plan real quick. It tells us change the top sheet, bottom sheet, and pillowcase while the resident remains in bed. The resident can roll and move as directed. They just can't get out of bed. So don't picture a paralyzed person. We can ask the patient to move, to roll, to shift, whatever we need them to do. They just can't get out of bed. Okay. Make sense? So think of a young woman in preterm labor. Okay, we don't want her upright, baby could fall out. But she can roll, she can move, right? So when you're doing these skills, I don't want you to immediately picture a 90-year-old comatose invalid. Remember that patients come in all different ages and all different levels of ability. So don't immediately go worst case scenario. Let our care plan tell us what to expect. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to learn a principle here. Clean rolls toward you, dirty rolls away. And that's how we're going to do this particular skill. Clean rolls toward me, dirty rolls away. Clean rolls toward me, dirty rolls away. So what that means is please remember the patient is still in the bed. We know because it's an occupied bed, right? Patient is still in the bed. So the thing that made the sheets dirty is still in the bed. Got that? So don't get all hung up on infection control here. Yes, dirty sheets are going to touch clean sheets. Yes, the dirty pillowcase is going to touch the clean sheets. The patient is still in the bed. The thing that made the sheets dirty is still there. We're not trying to make this sterile by any means. All we're trying to do is to make it less dirty. Cleaner. Make sense? Cleaner. But the way that we do this, let me give you a visual demonstration here. So if we have a sheet on the bed that is dirty, see how that's stained? Dirty. We have a sheet on the bed that is dirty. And we have a patient in that bed and we've got to change these sheets. So what we would do is take a new sheet and we're going to put it on the bed a half at a time. So clean rolls toward me, dirty rolls away. So I'm going to take this dirty sheet and roll it toward the patient. And I'm actually going to tuck it up underneath that patient so it stays. So now I got a bare mattress. I don't want a patient on a bare mattress. So I'm going to take the clean sheet, clean rolls toward me. So I'm going to roll that clean sheet toward me. And I'm going to tuck it up underneath that dirty sheet. So the underside of the dirty sheet is touching the underside of the clean one. We're trying to limit the amount of transfer, but you're not going to eliminate it. Does that make sense? So I've made the bed a half at a time. Then I go around to the other side of the bed, get rid of that one. That goes in dirty linen, smooth that one out. And now I have changed the under sheet. Good. Make sense? Kind of, sort of. It'll make sense once you see it. Okay. But yeah, the pillow's going to stay on the bed. That means the pillow's going to be on the dirty sheet and the clean sheet. That's okay. Patient's still in the bed. Still okay. Okay. Good. The whole point here is that we're going to change the bed a half at a time. Now, anything that we remove from the bed, we want to ball up. We don't want trailing edges to contaminate other surfaces. So when I take a sheet off the bed, I'm immediately going to ball it up so that I don't have any unsecured flappy corners. And we'll put it right in the dirty linen receptacle. Okay, good. But for the test, you're actually going to have a clothes hamper, a little laundry basket at the end of the bed. That's where it will be. Some testing centers have a big hamper like that, but not all do. Most of the time, it's just a little basket at the end of the bed. But in a healthcare setting, we don't keep dirty items in a patient room. We don't like dirty and patients to go together. So in most settings, that hamper is not going to be in the patient's room. It's going to be in the hallway. Or they may even have a whole room devoted to dirty things called a soiled utility room. And that's where your linens would go. That make sense? For the test, you'll have a basket at the end of the bed. You just throw the things in. For clinical settings, we have to handle this a little different. So we can't put anything on the floor. Nothing clean goes on the floor, but we also don't want anything dirty on the floor either. So at home, when I'm changing my sheets at home, I take the sheets off the bed. Where do they go? On the floor. Yeah, absolutely. But we can't do that in a clinical setting. So if I don't have a hamper or a basket in the room and I can't put my dirty things on the floor, what do I do with them? Where do they go? Well, in most cases, you're going to have a bag that you go get before you do this skill. And it's really light blue. And it actually is stamped with soiled linens on it or soiled utility on it. So you go get that bag first, open the bag up. You can put the bag on the floor. That's okay. And then you put the dirty linens in the bag. You could also get a barrier and put it on the floor. But the soiled linens don't go directly on the floor by themselves. Does that make sense? So you either put them on a barrier or in a bag, not on the floor. Good? Okay. So remember that that's a really big one is that nothing goes directly on the floor. So the checkpoints for this skill, this is what they're grading us on, is that the patient has to be in the middle of the bed. Okay. So hold on. Let me get my handy camera turner here. I'm going to need a volunteer, somebody to come over here into the bed. I'm going to turn the air on. I know no one ever wants to volunteer. Yeah, come on over here into this bed and just lay down. No, you can leave them on. It's fine. Yeah, you can leave them on. Okay, get comfortable. All right, so I asked her to lay down in the bed. Did I tell her to lay down in the middle of the bed? I just said lay down, right? Why did she put herself in the middle of the bed? Now, she knows she's not going to stay there very long. It'd make more sense for her to be right on the edge because she knows she's about to get up. So why did she put herself in the middle of the bed? Okay, more comfortable. It's actually because her brain says the edge is not safe. Your brain did that all by itself. I was not involved. I was not involved. Now, the reason for this is something called spatial awareness. When you are somewhere around 1.5 years old, right? Mom, when you're born, mom puts you in a crib because it's nice and safe. It keeps you from falling off the bed, right? It's safe. But when you get about a year and a half old, what happens when they put you in the crib? You climb out. So now that crib that was supposed to keep you safe, is it still keeping you safe? No, because if you fall, you're falling from a bigger height, right? Falling further, which increases the risk of injury. Does that make sense? Okay. So a little part of your brain is developing at this time. And that little part of the brain is called spatial awareness. And it's always aware of the space that you have to work with, and it keeps you safe in that space. Now, this little part of the brain is always on, even when you're sleeping. Because when you go to sleep at night, you toss and you turn. You don't wake up in the exact same position you went to sleep in. You're always moving. So that little teeny part of the brain is always on, even when you're sleeping. Now, there's two things that turn that little part of the brain off. One of them is alcohol. This is why you have a hard time sitting on a bar stool after a few too many drinks. And the other one is certain medications. Now, we don't serve alcohol in healthcare very often, but we do use medications. Does that make sense? Okay. So your patient, left to their own devices, will always put themselves in the middle of the bed because that little piece of brain is saying, hey, this is where I'm safe, right? We don't have to be involved in that. Patient does it themselves. If the patient is on certain medications, we may have to pay a little closer attention to this. Good? Make sense? Okay. Can you roll so that you're facing that? Are you comfortable?
You want me to hold this?
Yeah, so you're facing the wall. Are you comfortable there? You comfortable?
I wouldn't nuts.
I wouldn't be. Yeah. If you were laying in bed, so lay back down. If you were laying in bed and you went to turn over in bed, how would you do that? On your side. Ah, there it is. Okay. All right. So if she just rolls, she gets very close to the edge of the bed. I'm not comfortable with that because she could fall off. But at home, when she's turning over in bed, that's not what she does. She doesn't just roll close to the edge. She actually shifts her weight. So she is actually in the same place she was on her back, just facing a different direction. She's still in the middle of the bed. You do this all by yourself. Your body will always orient you to the middle of the bed, whether you're laying on your back or the side, doesn't matter. Thank you. Good job. So, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that if we are going to help somebody turn onto their side, we need to make sure that after the turn, they are in the middle of the bed, which is where they're safe. Now, if they're turning themselves, usually they'll do that themselves. They'll just kind of shift their bottom so they stay in the middle of the bed. But if we're going to do it, if we are physically turning a patient, we're going to scoot them toward us so that after the roll, after the turn, they're in the middle of the bed. Okay. So you do it yourself in one step. We're going to do it in two: scoot and then roll. Make sense? So for this skill, you're going to see me ask the patient to scoot toward me and then roll to the middle of the bed. That keeps them safe in the middle of the bed while I'm changing that sheet. Now, I could change a sheet with them laying on their back, but they're taking up way more of the bed. And that's going to be harder on me, more work. Where if I get them to lay on their side, they take up less space, which makes it easier for me to change the sheet. Good? So scoot and roll is important to keep the patient in the middle of the bed. Good? And you're going to see that in this particular skill. So when you turn a patient, by the way, you should always remain behind their behind. Never turn a patient towards you. We're going to get into that a little bit more on Wednesday. Never turn a patient towards you. We're going to remain behind their behind. But the patient has to be in the middle of the bed when we change the bottom of the sheet, preferably on their side because they take up less space. Clean rolls toward me, dirty rolls away. We're going to remain behind the patient's behind, and we want to smooth any wrinkles because wrinkles contribute to bed sores. We want to make hospital corners. I'll show you how. It's not nearly as hard as you think it is. And we're going to loosen the sheet over the toes so it doesn't bend the toes down. We want to replace the pillowcase with the opening facing away from the door. This isn't a really big checkpoint. It really isn't. But let me explain why. Okay, so let's say we have this patient here, and that is our doorway. A lot of people out there. A lot of people walking up and down that hallway. Those people are breathing. And germs may be hitching a ride on the flying fluids. Remember we talked about flying fluids, right? So if we have the pillowcase opening facing that door, those flying fluids could potentially get on the pillow inside the pillowcase. Now your patient is breathing in all of those pathogens all night long because under the pillowcase is warm and dark and moist because we drool. Right? So we don't want to create the ideal breeding environment for those pathogens. So if the opening is facing away from the door, less chance of pathogens getting inside the pillowcase. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a choice. Okay, I can demonstrate this live for you, where you can see it on the screen live, or I can show you the video that has good close-ups. If I do this live, I need a volunteer. What do you guys want? Looks like I've got a volunteer. Hey. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I guess.
All right. If you can, lay down underneath the top sheet for me. Yes. All right. So our patient is going to be uncovered for this skill. So what do I need? A privacy blanket. That's right. Our patient, this one right here, this lady right here is fully dressed, holding on to all of her own body fluids like a champ. She has no visible sores, wounds, openings, and I'm not going to touch any personal skin. Do I need gloves for this patient? No. If my patient was incontinent and there was urine on the sheets, would I need gloves? Okay, do you understand? It's not based on the skill. It's based on the patient. Good? All right, I will simulate hand washing for the sake of time for this skill. Remember that you are going to, come over here. Remember that you are going to wash your hands at the beginning and the end of the first skill that you do. After that, they're going to tell you you can simulate hand washing. Simulate means say. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Hi, Miss Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. How are you? Good. I need to change your sheets. Is that okay? All right, I'm going to go close your curtain, wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. You guys starting to see how the opening sounds the same all the time? So we're going to close the curtain. I have clean hands. I'm going to get a barrier. We always start with a barrier. It's first thing we get. We'll unfold it and put it on our table. And then I'm going to get what I need for, time out. I need to borrow a sheet. Okay, and then I need to get my linen. So I'm going to get a top sheet, a bottom sheet, and a pillowcase. I need a privacy blanket for this skill. So I'll put those items there. All right, Miss Jones, I'm going to place this blanket over you. This will help keep you warm and protect your privacy while we do this, okay? I don't want to snap or shake my blanket. I'm just going to lay it over the patient. Can you hold that at the top for me? I'm going to take the sheet all the way off the bed. So as I remove this from the bed, I want to roll it up in a ball. And we're going to put it right in our soiled utility hamper. Okay, can you scoot your whole body toward me? And then can you roll toward the middle of the bed so you're facing that wall? There you go. Okay, scoot forward just a tad. There we go. And now I'm going to loosen the sheet at the top and the bottom. And dirty rolls away. So I'm going to roll this away from me. And I want to roll it kind of tight, pretty much as tight as I can get it. And I'm going to tuck it all along the length of the body. So roll and tuck, roll and tuck. I'm going to lift the leg up just a little bit. Roll and tuck. Okay. Then I'm going to take the new bottom sheet. We'll unfold it, not snapping or shaking it, just unfolding. And we're going to attach the corners to the mattress. Being careful not to let it touch the floor. If it accidentally touches the floor, what do you think I need to do? Get a new one. So we're going to take this sheet. Remember, clean rolls toward me. So I'm going to roll this toward me as tight as I can. And we're going to tuck this underneath that soiled sheet. Remember, that's rolled underneath the patient. So we're going to lift and tuck. Lift and tuck. I'm going to lift your leg up. Okay. All right. Come on back onto your back. And you're going to scoot to the middle, big speed bump. There you go. Okay. And now we get to do it all over again. So scoot your body toward me a little bit. And then roll that direction. There you go. Scoot a little bit closer to the middle of the bed for me, your bottom. Good. Okay. So now, see how the two rolls are here? I'm going to remove the soiled one from the bed, bundling it up. There we go. We're going to bundle this up and put it directly in dirty linen. And then I'm going to unroll the clean sheet here, tuck it on the mattress. On all corners. Okay, remember I said that wrinkles contribute to, so I want to hold this as flat as I can. Come on back and then scoot to the middle. There we go. And I just want to check the sheet to make sure that it's secured well, that she doesn't have a ton of wrinkles. You're going to have some, there's a body in the bed, but we want to make sure that it's as flat as we can get it. So then I'll take the top sheet, unfold it. Be careful not to snap or shake. Drape it over the patient. And just try to kind of make sure it's even, on both sides. Okay. And now I'm going to tuck it underneath the mattress. So I'm going to lift the mattress up and tuck this flat under the mattress. And then I'm going to make a hospital corner. To make a hospital corner, I'm going to come down about a foot from the end of the mattress and pick the top flap only straight up. That creates a triangle. Everything else gets tucked underneath. That's a hospital corner. So we'll do it over here too. I'm going to lift the mattress up and tuck this flat. Do you see how that sheet is flat under the mattress? See how it's flat? I'm going to come down a foot from the end of the mattress, pick top flap only, straight up. That gives me a triangle. Everything else gets tucked underneath. It's a little tight on her toes, so I want to loosen that up a little bit. And I'm going to take that privacy blanket away because we don't need it anymore. Anything that we take off the bed, we roll in a ball. And we'll put that directly in dirty linen. All right, Miss Jones, I'm going to steal that pillow. I'll bring it right back. Thank you. This pillow has been drooled on, sneezed on, coughed on. I don't want to put this underneath my chin because that's just kind of gross. So we're going to remove the pillowcase, put it directly in dirty linen, and get the new pillowcase. There we go. Get the new pillowcase, and we're going to scrunch all the way to the corners like a stocking. The tag side of the pillow goes in. So I stand this pillow up with the tag side facing up, and I put the pillowcase over it like a nightcap and then pull the sides down. The opening is going to face away from the doors. So can you lift your head up? There we go. Comfortable? Is there anything else I can get for you while I'm here? Would you like a magazine before I go? Are you comfortable? Okay. This is going to be thrown away. Here we're recycled, so that's away. Here's your call light. Put that right in your hand. If you need anything at all, just press that red button and I'll come in and help. I'm going to open the curtain. Wash my hands. Think about the steps of my skill and make any corrections. My skill is done. Thank you. Any questions on that one? Oh. Boy, we got a lot of people on today. Hello, YouTube world. All right, so let's move on. Page 37. So let me go over this real quick one more time because I didn't really talk about that. We learned all of this, but this is a rule. This is a principle on the back wall. Linens must not touch uniform. You have to have clean hands to get your linens. Don't snap or shake. Clean rolls toward you, dirty rolls away. Don't let anything touch the floor, and unused items must be discarded. We don't ever put anything back in clean supply. Clean supply is clean. Once it leaves clean supply, it's not clean for the purposes of this, right? So if you take too many washcloths, you can't put them back. You also can't leave them in the patient's room because we don't know what happens to them once they're out of our sight. So the only thing that we can do is discard them, put them in soiled linens. So anything you don't use, you lose. Does that make sense? That could be a written test question. So keep that in mind. There we go. All right. All right. So we have respirations here, page 37. Respirations, the care plan at the top of the page. Go there real quick. Tells us the patient will be lying in bed for the skill, count the patient's respirations for 1 full minute, and record your readings. So respirations is the act of breathing. In and out counts as 1. So it doesn't matter whether I count on the inhale, the plateau, or the exhale, it's all still 1. So okay, doesn't matter where you count it, it's still 1. Normal is between 12 and 20. Okay. So a lot of students ask me, well, what happens if I start counting and they're already breathing? What if they're on an exhale? Well, remember, it doesn't matter where you count, it counts as 1. So if you start on an exhale, it still counts. It's part of the 1. Make sense? Good. So normal is between 12 and 20. Our care plan tells us to count for 1 full minute. So how long are we counting for? 1 full minute, because we follow the care plan. All right. So this is not a hard skill, guys. You're counting somebody's breathing for 1 full minute. That's it. That's all we're doing. We're going to put an opening in front of it, a closing behind it. That's it. This is not, and your reading is going to be probably somewhere between 12 and 20. So it's kind of a slow skill. Slow. But there's a couple of pitfalls here that I need to make you aware of. So I do need a volunteer, somebody to go lay down in that bed over there. This one's easy. All you got to do is lay there. No movement required. Ooh, Miss Jones. She needs a privacy blanket. All right, so there's a couple of problems with with this particular skill. So if I, do my opening, I'm going to count your, respirations. Is that all right? Whatever, yada, yada. So I've done my opening. And if I then come over here and just, how awkward is that? It's pretty awkward. Yeah. I'm pretty high on the creep meter right now because remember, laying down is vulnerable, right? So she is vulnerable, probably dressed in a hospital gown and not much else. And I'm some creeper staring at her chest. That's awkward. Now, the other problem is if I tell you, hey, I'm going to count your breathing. Ready, set, go. Yeah. Now you're aware of your breathing. So is that going to give me an accurate reading if they're aware of their breathing? Probably not, because that'll change their breathing patterns. So there's 2 things with this particular skill. Number 1, you can't tell them you're counting their breathing. You're going to say, I'm here to take your vital signs. Number 2 is you can't just stare at them while you're counting their breathing because that's just awkward. So when I do this skill, I'm actually going to hold her wrist. I do not have her pulse. I am holding her hand, basically. That's all I'm doing here. But she will focus here, and this feels much more comfortable to you, doesn't it? Isn't that funny? I'm not doing anything here other than holding your hand. but it allows you to relax, which means I'm going to get a much more accurate result. Good. Now, there is something you can use to make this easier. It's an easy skill. You're just counting the tummy rising, right? That's it for 1 full minute. That's not a hard skill. But some people, when they breathe, it's not real visible. It's kind of hard to pick up. So there's something you can do to make this even easier. So if you look at her tummy, see if you can see it going up and down as she breathes. Kind of hard to see, but it does go up and down a little bit. Now, just keep breathing. Can you see it better? Isn't that crazy? I used psychology. I did not alter her breathing at all. I altered your ability to see it because your brain is wired to pay attention to movement when it's a contrasting color. This is what kept us safe when the saber-toothed tigers were roaming. Okay. Because when you saw a flash of color, a different color that was moving, it usually indicated danger. So your brain picked up on it. So that's all I'm doing here is I put something on her tummy that's a different color to help me see the respirations. Now you can use this on the state exam. There's no problem with it. And it does help because remember, you want those evaluators on the other side of the room, not hanging out over you, right? So it's perfectly okay to do this. And you can do this in a clinical setting too. But we always use alcohol pads for this purpose. There's several reasons. Number one, they're lightweight, so they don't affect the breathing. Number two, they're disposable. We can throw them away afterwards. But the real reason here, and they're readily available, right? They're everywhere in a hospital or a medical center. But the real reason is that alcohol pads are mystical, magical, and medical. If I put anything else on her tummy, she'll ask, why is that there? If I put an alcohol pad on her tummy, she'll assume that I'm going to need it later, and she won't ask. Or if she does ask, I can give her a total nonsense answer like, I'll need that later. And she'll go, okay. Right? It doesn't give that whole questioning response that we get. If I put a pin on her tummy, she's going to ask. Because pins don't normally go on tummies, right? So it's just a way of getting your patient to relax into what you're doing. And that's why we use alcohol pads. Good? Make sense? Okay. So this is a documentation skill. I have to document at the end of the documentation skill. So I want to make sure that the documentation form that they give me before I start the skill is put in a visible place so that at the end of the skill, I see it and I go, oh yeah, I got a document. So I'm literally going to put it on the table where I can see it. Okay, good. So I'm going to do this whole skill and you guys are going to be the evaluators. When I look at the clock and I say start out loud, you're going to count the respirations quietly in your own head until I say stop. And then I'm going to do my closing. I'll write down my reading and I'll see how close you guys were. You can be off by 2 breaths in either direction and still be okay. All right. So here we go. Hi, Miss Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. How are you? Fantastic. I need to take your vital signs. Is that okay? I'm going to close your curtain. Let me go wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. I'm going to close the curtain, go wash my hands. I have clean hands. All right, Miss Jones, this is going to take me about a minute. I will need you to remain quiet as I do this, but I'll let you know as soon as I'm done, okay? I just need to lay that there for a second. Is everybody ready? Set, start. Thank you very much, Miss Jones. Is there anything else I can get for you while I'm here? Would you like a magazine before I go? Are you comfortable? Yeah. Okay. Let me get you to lift your shoulder up real quick so I can get your call light. There's your call light. If you need anything else, just press that red button. I'm going to open your curtain and go wash my hands. Wash my hands. After washing my hands, I'll document my reading. I'm going to wash my hands again because I've documented, because I have to end skill with clean hands. And I'll tell the evaluator my skill is done. I got 16. What'd you guys get? Yeah. So if you didn't count the last one, you probably got 15 because I ended right as she was inhaling. Remember, any part would count, right? So if you got 14, 15, 16, 17, or 18, you are accurate. That's a huge margin of error, guys. Thank you very much. All right. Any questions? Any questions?
If it's like, if she's like in between, like when she's breathing, it doesn't matter like which part of that, as long as it's like the first, like in the middle of the breath or in the end of the breath.
The whole breath counts. So inhale, plateau, exhale. Any part of that counts. So if we start and she's exhaling, it counts. If we end and she's inhaling, it counts. Because the whole thing counts as one. Good. Okay, let's talk about military time, page 29. Because, well, keep your finger on page 29, but go back to page 120. These are the actual documentation forms that are used on the state exam. So you've got these in your book. You can practice with them. So on respirations, there is no place to write the time for the test, but you will need to document the time in a clinical setting. Okay, that's all part of documentation. So usually, go back to page 29, we use military time for documentation. Not all of you are aware of how military time works. So this worksheet helps you kind of decipher it. But military time is 4 numbers all squished together. No AM, no PM, no colon, just 4 numbers. That's it. And it always amazed me, you know, when I was a kid, way before I knew what military time was, I didn't even know it existed. But when I was a little kid, I asked, why do we count till 12 and start over? Because there's 24 hours in a day. Didn't make sense to me. If there's 24 hours in a day, why do we only use 12 and then have to recycle and use them again? It makes more sense if there's 24 hours a day to use all 24. So instead of restarting at 1, we're just going to keep going. So we have 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and then we start all over again at 0 for the new day at midnight, right? So if there's 24 hours in a day, we're going to use every single one of them on a 24-hour clock, not start over again after 12. Good? Okay. So anything before 10 a.m., because remember, we have to have 4 numbers. Anything before 10 a.m., we got to put a 0 in front. So 3 a.m. is 0300 because you have to have 4 numbers. But we don't have to use AM or PM. So this is a little worksheet to help you with that. Okay. Any questions? Questions on military time? You don't have to use it on the test. Don't have to. You can use regular time, but if you do, you have to use AM or PM. If you just write 11:35, that is not documentation of time. Because I don't know, is that AM or PM? Because healthcare works 24 hours a day. All right, so moving on. Here we go. This is a big one. Let's go to page 40. So we're going to talk about blood pressure. The first thing that you need to know is that blood pressure is not tested on the state exam. So you're not going to have to perform this for the test. Doesn't mean you don't need to know it or learn it. It just means that you won't have to do it for the state exam. Good. But just like we use the pulse ox to get a pulse, and we had to know how to take it manually in case the pulse ox gave us an abnormal reading. Same thing with blood pressure. We're going to use a machine in a lot of cases, but we have to know how to take it manually. And that's what we're going to learn today. It's not a hard skill, but it is a complex skill. You have to have your eyes, your ears, your brain, and your hand all doing something at the same time. So this can be a little bit complex to try to learn. Now, you're not going to be accurate today, not even close. It takes about 45 blood pressures before you really start to dial this in. So it takes a lot of time to learn this skill. You're going to need to practice a lot. So try to find some people in your orbit to practice on, but don't practice on anybody under 13. This hurts little arms. You'll make them afraid of medical. That's not fair. Don't practice on anybody over 80. They have their own health conditions. They don't need to be your guinea pigs. Leave them alone. Between 13 and 80, if you can tackle them, fair game. Practice. Don't just practice on one person, though. If you practice on just one person, then because everybody's blood pressure sounds a little bit different. If you're just practicing on one person, you kind of get used to how their blood pressure sounds. And then if you hear somebody else's, it'll sound different and it may sound funny. So you need a wide variety of practice. Okay, good. All right. So remember that this is not tested on the state exam. So if you remember, when we learned pulse last week, you saw this graphic. The heart squeezes, it pushes out a wave of blood. That one pushes one in front of it. That one pushes one in front of it. And we just press down on the artery to feel the thumps under our finger. You guys remember that? Pulse counts how many thumps. Blood pressure tells us how much pressure is inside when the wave is moving through and in between the waves. So a good analogy for this, if you have a faucet on the outside of your house, like an outdoor spigot, you have a hose on there. You walk out, you turn the water all the way on, the hose expands, it gets bigger, more pressure inside because water's moving through. Turn the faucet off, the water trickles out, the hose gets squishier, less pressure inside. So all your heart is doing is standing at the faucet going on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, like 70 times a minute for your entire life. That's your heart's job. It's just going to turn the faucet on and off rhythmically. What I'm looking for is how much pressure is inside that hose when the heart squeezes or when it's on, and how much pressure is inside the artery when it's off, when the heart is at rest. That's what we're measuring here. Now, let's keep with the hose analogy for a second. If we had a hose in the Florida sun where the water was on full force, nonstop for 10 years, baking under the stress of the Florida sun, what do you think is going to happen to that hose over time? It wears down. Yeah, and it probably is going to split. because that's what hoses do. They tend to split, right? And it's because the reason that they're splitting is because there's stress inside, right? All the pressure on the inside, but there's also stress outside, the sun beating down on it to erode it away. Does that make sense? You following me? Okay. In the body, when that happens, we call it an aneurysm. In the brain, when that happens, we call it a stroke. So if you have high pressure inside that isn't controlled and stress outside, you can have a split of the artery, which our artery is like the hose. In the body, it's an aneurysm. In the brain, it's a stroke. This is why we don't like high blood pressure, because it puts too much pressure on the inside of the artery. And when you have external stress on the outside of the artery, it wears down the artery. Make sense? So as a CNA, our job is to go around and find high blood pressure. So I'm going to take yours. Is it high? I'm going to take yours. Is it high? Oh, yours is high. I got to go report that. Because what we're trying to do is find a problem and get rid of the problem before it becomes a really big problem later. Now, remember this. You guys remember this? CNAs do normal. So CNAs are trying to find high blood pressure, but if I already know yours is high, I don't need to find it. We know yours is high. So if CNAs do normal, who would be taking her blood pressure if it's high? The nurse. You guys see that? Okay. CNAs are responsible for finding a problem to report. They are not responsible for managing that problem. It's important that you understand that, because that's going to dictate how high up we go on blood pressure on the dial. Good? Questions? You guys got that? You understand what's happening here? All right, in order to take a blood pressure, so this is an artery, guys. This is an artery. Heart squeezes, pushes a wave of blood out in an artery. What we want to do is close off that artery. I'm literally going to put a toll plaza there. Okay, I'm going to do it with a blood pressure cuff. I put air in the cuff, it squeezes the muscles squeeze the artery and closes it off. So now my heart is still beating. It better be, right? My heart is still beating. So there's still more waves showing up, but they just can't get past the toll plaza. We've blocked it just on this one road. Everybody with me so far? And then we are slowly going to let the air out, which releases the pressure on the muscles, which allows the artery to open a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Remember, we got all these waves waiting to go through because we blocked it. All these waves are waiting. Eventually, the artery is going to be wide enough that that first wave can squeeze through. And when that wave squeezes through, it hits the top of the artery and it makes a thunk sound. Now, if the first one can get through, the second one can, and the third too. So when you hear that first thunk sound, you're going to hear more thunk, 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 thunk. And those are all the waves that are able to get through. Now, we're still getting the artery bigger and bigger and bigger because we're still letting the air out. Eventually, the artery is going to be so big that when the wave goes through, it doesn't hit the top of the artery anymore. No more thunk sounds. So where we heard the first thunk, that's the top number of our blood pressure. Where we heard the last clear thunk, that's the bottom number of our blood pressure. There's no counting, there's no math, there's no nothing. We're going to inflate the cuff to close off the artery, deflate the cuff slowly, and we're going to listen. And it's going to be quiet, 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 still quiet, thunk. Wherever that needle is, when you hear that first thunk, that's your top number. It's pointing at the number. And then we're going to hear more. because more waves can come through. Thunk, 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 thunk. We don't care about those. Thunk, 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 thunk. And then we're going to hear nothing. Quiet again. So wherever you heard the last thunk, where the needle is pointing, that's your bottom number. Now the bottom's hard though, because it doesn't say get ready, get set, here I come, ta-da. It doesn't do that. It just goes thunk, 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 thunk. Oh, what? There's no more. Where was the last one? So you kind of have to pay attention to each one of those because you don't know if it's going to be the last one until there's no more. Make sense? Got it? So it's not a hard skill. We inflate, we deflate, we listen for the first, we listen for the last. It's not a hard skill. But there's a lot going on here. Because your ears have to listen for the thunks. And there's a lot of competing noises. You'll hear your fingers creak. You'll hear the tubes rubbing together. You may even hear the ceiling fan, right? Because it's a really good microphone that we're using. So we're going to hear all kinds. So there's a lot of competing noise. So your ears have to pay attention. Your eyes have to watch that needle. Your hand has to control how fast that needle is moving, and that's all you. And your brain is in charge of all of that. So the brain is like, ears, listen up, eyes, pay attention, hand, move the dial. So your ears hear a thunk, the brain tells the eyes, where's the needle? The eye says, here's the needle, and the hand says, hold up. So there's a lot going on at one time. This takes a lot of practice. Good? Make sense? But overall, on paper, it's not overly hard. So if you look at the bottom of page 38, you'll see a dial. This thing. This is similar to what you have on your blood pressure cuff. These are called aneroid sphygmomanometers. We used to use mercury. They were tall columns. You inflated, it went up. You deflated, it came down, right? Little. But then we realized mercury wasn't really good to have hanging around. So we went to these. Now these are aneroid. They're basically air. Sphygmomanometer is a very fancy way of saying blood pressure measuring device. But they have very specific markings. You'll see that all the numbers on here are in 20s. So you can see a line for 20, 40, 60, 80, and so on. So this is a bigger version of what you have at the bottom of the page. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, and so on. The big lines in between are your tens, your odd numbers. So if this is the line for 40 and this is the line for 60, the big line in between would be 50. So if you count 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, even though they're not marked, we know what they are. Now, the little itty bitty teeny tiny lines in between are twos. So if this is the line for 80, this makes 82, 84, 86, 88, and then 90. Got it? Okay. So what makes this a little bit difficult is that the numbers count up, but the needle is going to be coming down. So your brain has to kind of make this flip, because if you hear the first thump right here where this yellow line is and your needle is coming down, that's the line for 120, right? So your brain is going to want to count up even though the needle is counting down. So you have to be careful here. Does that kind of make sense? So if this is the line for 100 and the first thump was heard here, 3 ticks above 100, so that's 100, 102, 104, 106. And then we heard more thumps, thump, 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 thump. We don't care. Thump, 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 thump. This is our last one right here. 3 ticks above 60. So this is 60, 62, 64, 60. So what is this person's blood pressure? That's right, 106 over 66. That is the patient's blood pressure. So next question is that normal? So if you look on page 39 at the top of the first column, you'll see that normal values for the top number is between 100 and 119. Normal value for the bottom number is between 60 and 79. So 106 over 66, is that normal? Okay, good. Good. Okay. So let's try it together. If you look at the gray box, page 39, these are kind of hard to read, I know. But if you look at number 8, you'll see that, the first little picture there of the gauge. It has 2 lines. It tells you where the first thump was heard and the last thump was heard. What is this patient's blood pressure? Do the one above it. No, do this one above it. Yep, this one. What do you guys think? 130 over 90. Yeah. Is that normal? So what would we do with that information? Report it to the nurse. All right, let's go down to number 10. What is that blood pressure? Everybody getting somewhere around there, 108 over 62-ish? I know it's kind of hard to see. Is that normal? Okay. So would we need to report that one to the nurse? Okay. So let's say we got that blood pressure, 108 over 62. That's what we got. And we go to document it, right? It's nothing we need to report. It seems in normal limits. We go to document it. And the readings that everybody got before us, all the other readings are 160 over 110 or 154 over 108 or 180 over 96. And today we got 106 over 62. Okay, double check it, but what if it's right? What if we really were right? It's 106 over 62. Why? Even though it's normal, why? It's not normal for them. That is correct. That is correct. So even though we are paying attention to normals, we also have to look at what is normal for the patient. This patient, by the way, probably has an internal bleed. The number one reason for a sudden drop in blood pressure. Yeah. You might have just saved their lives by picking that up. Okay, good. Questions? Now, we've talked about the thumps, right? We inflate the cuff. It's going to be quiet, 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 thump. We get more thumps. We hear the last clear thump, and then it's quiet again. Those thumps have a name. Those thumps are called Korotkoff sounds. You don't need to know that for the test, but it is good to just know that the thumps have a name. They're called Korotkoff sounds. Yeah, you don't need to know how to spell it, but it's Korottoff. I believe it was I believe it was the guy who actually figured out how to take a blood pressure. Okay. Good. Anybody lost yet? All right. Let's put it together. Pull out your blood pressure cuffs and stethoscopes. Okay, so we're going to talk about the stethoscope first. So this end of the stethoscope, this is a microphone. That's what, it's a very sensitive microphone, but it has two sides to it. You've got a large side and a smaller side. If it's flat, it's called a diaphragm. If it's curved, it's called a bell. But as a CNA taking blood pressure, we are trying to hear a wave of blood hitting the top of an artery, buried under muscle, fat, and tissue. This is not a big sound. We want the biggest microphone we can find. We are going to use the large side. But the problem is that both of these are not amplifying at the same time, because if both of them amplified, you would hear the fan spinning and people outside. We don't want to, we want to listen to just what we're listening to. So that means you have to tell this what side you are listening to. This whole thing turns. The whole head of the stethoscope turns. Now you probably have a little dot. You guys see your little dot? You see your dot? The dot is which side is on. So you want your large diaphragm to be facing the same direction as the dot. Okay, good. Everybody's large diaphragm facing the dot. Let me come around and just make sure. Dot, dot, dot. Move your finger for a second. There we go. Okay, now yours is different. Yours, do you see how you can see all the way through? And yours doesn't want to turn. You do have a dot there, but yours doesn't want to turn at all. Okay. Yeah, yours, you see your dot way up there? See the dot? That tells you which side is on, but yours doesn't want to turn. And you're good. Okay. So as important as that is, and it is very important, that is not the most important part of your stethoscope. These guys are. And everybody puts these things in wrong. So if you notice, your earpieces have a slight curve to them, right? They kind of point in one direction. You guys see that? They have a slight curve to them. Okay, we got to change yours. Yours are adjustable like mine. So we need them to have just a slight curve. Okay. So some of yours are preset, but they have a slight curve. Now, if you look at them from profile, see how my earpieces kind of point that direction a little bit? If you put them together, you can see a little better. Yep. See how they have a point to them, right? They're pointing. When you put these in your ears, you have to put them in so they're facing forward. Not like this. They don't face you. Remember, in healthcare, it's always about the patient. So this has to point to the patient. So have them point away from you toward the patient. Put your earpieces in your ears and ever so gently tap your large diaphragm. You should be able to hear it. Hear it? Take it out. Okay. Well, we're going to flip them. You want them, now you want them to face you. Yep. Put them in and now tap. Can't hear as well. Okay, put them back in the right way. Tap again. And you can hear it. Remember, we are listening to a wave of blood hitting the top of an artery. We want a good sound system for that sound. Does that make sense? Later on today, when you're practicing on each other, some of you are going to say, I can't hear anything. I'm not hearing thumps. I can't hear anything. And the first thing I'm going to ask you is, which way are your earpieces pointing? That is the number one reason that you can't hear a blood pressure. Good. Questions? Okay. So that's the stethoscope. When we put the stethoscope against the skin where we're going to listen, you don't want to just set it in place. We want a good tight seal to block any air from entering. Because remember, air brings sound. So don't just kind of put your finger there and let it pop up. You want to use 2 fingers and sandwich it in. You want a good seal against the skin. Good. But now we got to know, where do we put that stethoscope? Well, we're listening for a wave of blood hitting the top of an artery. So that means that we have to be over the artery, right? Have you ever had your blood pressure taken? Well, when they took your blood pressure, they probably just took one of these things and plopped it right in the middle, inflated and deflated. That's not where your artery is. Now you can see my vein here. I've got a good vein. I've got a vein there, but an artery and a vein are 2 different things. That's like saying the roots of a tree are the same as the branches. They're 2 different things. So right now we have to find the artery. So this is like finding your pulse. Remember what the pulse felt like, the thumps under your fingers? That's what we're going to feel here. So if you put your arm out, either one, get that elbow popped straight out. You need a straight arm for this. Take 2 fingers. Remember, you never use your thumb to find an artery. 2 fingers. And on the pinky side, at the fold of the elbow, at the lines, but more on the pinky side, put your fingers there and your thumb on the back. It's not in the middle, guys. It's more on the pinky side. See if you can find your thumbs. See if you can feel your thumbs. Got thumbs? Straighten your arm out. Pop that elbow nice and high. You might need just a little bit closer to the middle. Got it? Okay. You got it? Got it? Okay, find somebody else's. Find somebody else's. A little harder. Notice it's not in the middle. Notice it's not in the middle. If I have a microphone here, you'll hear me just fine because it's in the right spot. If I put the microphone over here, it's not going to be as effective. Sure. So it's right here under my finger. Hers is buried pretty deep. So I'm going to show you a trick. See how I put my fingers there and just kind of wiggle back and forth? Right there. And hers. It doesn't matter which one. Is she pressing harder than I press? Okay, not quite so hard, not quite so hard. Okay. It's like a straw. If you press too hard, you'll crimp it. Yeah, hers, she has a lot of tissue there. Here, try mine. Big muscles. You want to be way up here at the lines. That's just a little harder. Not quite. Yeah, it's going to be way fainter than the radial pulse because it's buried under a lot more tissue. So go practice on them as well. Remember that everybody's is going to feel a little different.
I don't know if I'm putting my fingers in the wrong spot. That is not good.
Is she pressing harder or softer? Okay, press a little bit harder. Okay. Yep, let's try. Hers is, yeah,
I was like, what is my advance is wrong spot? And it's just not like, should I go come from like this?
doesn't
way?
matter, doesn't matter. You want to be right there. Put your thumb on the back. You want to be halfway between the middle and the pinky.
Okay, I feel good. No. Really good.
Okay. Now close your eyes. It increases the sensitivity of your fingers. And it's, yeah. Well, remember, everybody's is in a slightly different area. Fingers there, thumb on the back. It's between the middle and the pinky. Yeah, hers is really kind of faint too. It's right here,
Right there?
right there.
Okay, yeah, I want to test.
So see how everybody's is in a slightly different place? Hers was a little closer to the middle. Hers is a little bit more on the outside, right? Because humans are all a little different. Some of us have eyes that are a little wider, a little closer together, noses that are a little bigger, a little smaller. Everybody is a little bit different. So that's why you have to find the artery. You can't just throw a stethoscope on there and hope for the best, because everybody's is a little bit different placement. So, yep, once you try, I'm going to show you 2 tricks with this. Okay, so find your artery again. And then once you have it, once your finger is on it, let your arm relax. Keep your finger there, but let your arm relax a little bit. And you'll notice that it goes away. If you pop your arm back out, it's back. So when you're trying to find somebody's artery, you've got to make sure that elbow is completely out and locked flat. That pushes the artery closer to the surface so we can feel it. Other than that, if the arm is bent, the artery sags down. Okay. But there's something else that you can do to make this a little bit easier as well, particularly if you're having trouble finding the artery. So in some people, we have an artery, we have a muscle and a tendon that literally overlap on top of that artery. So if you saw, I did this with her, and I think I did it with you too. When I put my finger there, if I didn't feel it right away, I wiggled front, back, middle. When you do that, it moves those two areas out of the way. So you're more on top of the actual artery. So it's just, what we call a lateral move. So outside, inside, middle, outside, inside, middle. If you do that, it kind of pushes those two things out of the way, and it can help you feel the artery a little bit more effectively. You can always close your eyes because that increases the sensitivity of your fingertips as well. Once you start doing this, and man, anybody that I literally could grab, I was feeling their brachial artery. Let me find yours. Let me find yours. Let me find yours. I mean, everybody was fair game for this. I started to zero in and be able to pick it up. And then, by the time I got like 30 people, I was like right on top of it every time. I knew exactly where to go. So this just takes a little bit of practice. Okay, good. Questions? Not so bad so far, right? Okay. So now we're going to move on to our blood pressure cuff or sphygmomanometer. So these are not one size fits all. They're one size fits most, but not one size fits all. But they do have a handy measuring guide built right in. So those of you who have the professional cuffs, you'll see a white stripe on one of the small edges. And this white stripe, I'll help you put that together. The white stripe is how you measure. So if I'm concerned that this cuff may be too big for you, because you've got really, really small arms. So if I'm concerned that this cuff may be too big, I don't want to use a cuff that's not the right size because it's going to give me a faulty reading. So if I'm concerned, I would use the white stripe to measure. And what I would do is place this. I'm going to borrow your arm. I'm just going to turn this a little bit so that people at home can play along. Okay. What did I do? Okay. All right. We're going to bring your arm a little over this way. So if I'm concerned, I would take this white stripe and I would put it underneath the arm about an inch or so above the elbow. Can you guys see that on the screen? Okay. If this wraps more than halfway around her arm, and it does, this cuff is too big for you. That means that if I take a reading with this cuff, it's probably not going to be all that accurate. If it's less than a third of the way around the arm. So if I put this underneath an arm and I can't see either one of these two corners, it's too small for my patient. So it's got to be between 1/2 and 1/3 the size of the arm. Okay, good. Makes sense? Kind of, sort of, a little bit. Okay. So that's how we measure this cuff to see if it's going to work for our patient. Now, on the front of the cuff, you have a gauge. That gauge is heavy. Imagine this falling on you. It's heavy. So what we want to do is make sure that this doesn't fall on our patients, particularly that it doesn't fall on the wrist of the patient, which is usually what's right there. Wrist has a lot of little teeny tiny bones. It's called an articulating joint. Has a lot of little tiny bones. And if our patient has osteoporosis and this falls on their wrist, you know what's going to happen to their wrist? It's going to shatter. So when you put a cuff on and take it off, this needs to be firmly attached. Now I know it's got these little prong things. This is not firmly attached, just hanging there. It can fall off. The bottom of your gauge has a little clip. If you press down on the bottom of the clip, top magically opens. If you find your fabric strip on your cuff, open your clip and slide it up the fabric strip. Well, that's a tongue twister. It will stay there. And now it's safe. You can put this on, you can take it off, you can hang upside down with it, and it's not going to fall off and hurt your patient. Now, below that is a little artery marker. Remember how we just found the artery? That's okay. I'll let you borrow mine. Remember how we just found the artery? Well, you could, I mean, it's possible for you to take a pen, find the artery, and put a little X there. Now you know where to put your stuff. You can do that, but do you think your patient wants you writing on them? Doesn't look all that professional. So instead of writing on the patient, we wrote on the cuff. So you are going to use this to show you later where the artery is. And the way this works, don't do this on yourselves. I'm just going to show you real quick, okay? You're going to lay this above the fold of the elbow, and we definitely want it above the fold. Have you ever seen somebody that took blood pressure like this and they shoved the stethoscope underneath? Okay, so here's the problem with that. This is a microphone, right? If I have a microphone right here and it's out in the open, you can hear me. What happens if I cover that microphone? Yeah, it muffles it or deadens the sound, so I'm not going to be as effective, right? When you take this and shove it underneath your cuff, you're deadening the sound. It's not going to be as accurate. So you don't want the cuff low. You want it at least an inch above the elbow. Now we're going to find our artery. There it is. And I'm going to line that arrow up with where my fingers are. Now I have an X marks the spot, or in this case, an arrow marks the spot. Then I'm going to secure this snugly around my arm. You want it snug. And then I can take the blood pressure. This tells me where to put my stethoscope when I'm ready. Good. Notice there's one for right arm and there's one for left arm. Because when I bring this over here, if I just use that one arrow, this gauge is going to be buried. I wouldn't be able to see. Okay, good. Questions? Okay. Now the last part is the working part. This is the bulb and valve assembly. You're going to hold this in your hand so the tubing points up, not like this. This is not correct. This is correct. And you want to hold it so that little silver dial is facing you. This is like a hand grenade. What happens if you let go of a hand grenade? It goes boom. This is treated like a hand grenade. We're not going to let go. So we're going to pump it up, and then we're going to use this little dial to let the air out, but we don't want to let that little dial go. So once your fingers get on this dial, you're holding it until the end. Got it? All right. So we're going to practice this part. Don't inflate your cuffs yet. If you inflate a cuff that's not wrapped around something, it can explode. And then you have to buy a new one. You don't want to do that. Okay, wrap your cuff around your can that I just gave you. I'm just going to borrow this for 1 second, and then I'll give it back. You want to wrap this around your can so the gauge is facing you, just like this. This extra flap, tuck it behind and hold it with your fingers. This is going to be held in your non-dominant hand, just like I am, because I'm going to hold the bulb and valve assembly in my dominant hand. So this is what you should look like in just a moment. This is what you should look like. All right, righty tighty, lefty loosey. So we are going to use that little silver dial, turn it to the right. Turn it to the right. Don't tighten it just until it stops. Don't tighten it down. Just go until it stops. Then you're going to squeeze your bulb. Get that needle up somewhere between 160 and 180. That's as far as we go. 160 to 180. Once it gets up there, you're going to take that little silver dial between your thumb and index finger and turn it just ever so slightly to the left, and the needle's going to start to come down. Okay, these are little teeny tiny Thumbelina motions. Way smaller than you think they are. So inflate and try it again. This is why I have you practice on cans and not your neighbors. We'll be practicing on them in a minute. Teeny tiny motions, teeny tiny. Now, if that needle stops, that's you. You got to open it a little more. And you'll notice that will happen as the needle's coming down. It's going to slow down and start, to really, really slow down or stop. You want to open the valve just a little bit more. So as that needle's coming down, you should be opening it a little more at a time. Little more, little more, little more, little more. Now, when you think you've got it down, let me know and I'll come take a look. Just inflate, deflate. That's what we're practicing right now.
180. Is it the needle supposed to stop, or does it like move back? Like, does it go down a little bit?
That needle, yeah, it can, yes, it can. And that's fine. That's fine. It's because of the excess pressure in the cuff. Inflate, deflate, inflate, deflate, inflate, deflate. Yeah, it should look like a second hand going backwards. Yeah, that's good. That's a little fast.
More? No, it's because I moved it.
Yeah.
Myself move it. You want to keep it at the same pace.
Same rate. Don't let it stop. Don't let it stop.
Right.
So let me show you real quick. This is what it should look like. Not about logo. I don't want it to stop. So it starts to slow down. I'm going to open it a little more. See how it's slowing down? I'm going to open it a little more. And as it starts to slow down, I'm going to open it a little more. And when I say a little, I'm talking a hair.
Yeah.
I'm talking, you can't even see my fingers move. Okay, come on. Okay, it's not, yeah, it's not closed. We got to go. There we go. Now try it. Oh, no, no, no. You're right there is stop. Stop right there. Okay, so now let it go down. That's good. Keep going down though at that rate. Don't let it stop. Try it again. Little fast. That's a better rate right there. So practice coming off of that start. Go ahead and try yours. That's fast. Yeah, it's too fast.
Yeah.
We want to go up to somewhere between 160 and 180.
Oh.
Yeah, still a little fast. Let me see it real quick and I'll show you what we're looking for here. That's the rate we want. Okay. So let me explain to you what happens if you go too fast. And I know you guys have seen this like in a clinical setting, right? Somebody's taking your blood pressure, they pump it up, and the needle goes, whoop, and they give you numbers. Well, the problem with that is, remember everything that has to go on here, right? Your ears have to hear a thump. Has to tell your brain, hey, we heard a thump. Brain has to ask the eyes, where's the needle? The eyes has to say the needle is here. And the brain has to say, what number is that? Right? If the needle is going, woo, you're not going to be able to get all of that stuff done in that time period. That's why it needs to go somewhat slow. Now, you're new, so it's going to go a little slower because you need that extra time because you're new. As you get into this a little bit, you get some practice under your belt, you'll be able to go a little faster. But remember, there's a lot that has to happen in that time period. Some of you are going to have problems with the top number because it's quiet. If you're the type of person that your brain wanders off and picks daisies when it's quiet, you're going to have trouble here because you go up 160 to 180, you come down and it's quiet, 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 quiet. I'm hungry, quiet. I wonder, quiet, what I want, quiet for lunch. Thump, thump, taco, thump, bell, thump, nah, thump, Wendy's, thump, nah, thump. Oh, thumps. Where was the first one, right? So some of you are going to have trouble on the top one because your brain is out picking daisies. Some of you are not going to have any trouble with the top one. It's quiet, quiet, quiet. There it is. It's easy. You're going to have trouble on the bottom. And my bottom people, my top people are my dreamers, right? Go pick daisies. My bottom people are my dancers. You're my rhythm people because blood pressure has a rhythm because it's dictated by the heart, right? Heart squeezes, pushes out a wave of blood. It's very rhythmical. And a lot of you, when you hear a rhythm, you tend to get into the rhythm and you start playing along. How many of you filled in that next beat when I stopped? If you filled in the next beat, you're going to have trouble with the bottom one because you're not going to be sure, was it a thump or did I imagine the thump, right? So some of you are like me, you're going to have trouble on both ends. And this is going to be like, whoa, what do I do here? So this is going to take some practice on your part. It's not something that's going to come right away overnight. You have to put the time in for this particular skill. Does that make sense? Okay. So a couple of things with blood pressure. First of all, the arm has to be supported. Don't have the arm hanging out in midair because that requires muscles. Those muscles are going to need more blood flow, which means we're going to increase the pressure. So the arm has to be supported on a table or a surface. The patient needs to be sitting with their feet flat on the floor. And we need to ask, which arm can I use? Now, if the patient doesn't care, pick one. We always go with the left. But sometimes patients have reasons that we can't use a certain arm. Like, what if the patient had a stroke and one side was affected? What if the patient has an IV right now? We don't want to use that arm. If the patient's having dialysis and they have a shunt or a graft in an arm, we don't want to use that arm. If the patient played Humpty Dumpty and we had to put them all back together again and they got plates and rods and screws, we don't want that arm, right? We want the healthiest arm the patient has. And if the patient's had a mastectomy or a breast removal and they took the lymph nodes, we don't want that arm either. Okay. So it's simple. We consult the care plan or we ask the patient, which arm can I use? If they have a reason not to use an arm, they'll tell you, oh, don't use this arm. Okay. Good. But if you have a choice, left is best. Left is best. Good. All right, remember our normals, top number is between 100 and 119, bottom number is between 60 and 79. And these are our instructions to do this. So you're going to be practicing on each other in just a few seconds. And I want you to read through this list, and I want you to remember each one of these things when you go to practice on somebody else. Please do not inflate above 180. That hurts. What effect do you think pain has on blood pressure? What do you think it makes blood pressure do? Go up. Remember, as CNAs, we're just looking for a problem. Did we really find a problem if we created the problem, right? So we have to be careful not to go over 180 because it hurts and that can affect the patient. Make sure your ear tips are facing forward. We're going to listen through the larger diaphragm, not the smaller one, on the stethoscope. You want to make sure the cuff is on snug above the fold of the elbow. We're going to find the brachial artery with our fingers, not listen. Right now, your artery is wide open. You can't hear the waves going through. So we have to feel for it with our fingers, right? We're going to close the valve. We're going to inflate to 160, 180. We're going to deflate smoothly. We're going to listen for the first thump and the last thump. So that's what we're going to do. And you're going to take each other's blood pressure. You have 30 minutes to take 4 blood pressures. So no pressure. But remember, the arm does need to be supported. So I'm going to ask you to come sit over here. And we have an odd number of people. So there will always be one person out. So we're going to rotate through. Okay. Oops. Oh, can you grab your phone? So here. All right. Okay, so you come over here and have a seat. And you are going to take her blood pressure. Okay. Make sure the arm is supported. I'm just going to move this table back just a little bit. So I'm going to have you turn your chair around. There you go. And you're going to come around here and take her blood pressure. Now, everybody's going to rotate. So listen up, pay attention. You're going to take her blood pressure, and then you're going to get up and take her blood pressure. She's going to get up and go around here. Okay, so the person that's sitting will always be moving. Okay, so you're going to take her blood pressure, and then she's going to come over here and you're going to take a blood pressure then. Got it? So everybody's going to be moving. All right. So remember, ear tips face forward. Go ahead and practice. So you get to sit out for a minute. Yeah, I always try to get an even number of people for today, but it didn't work out. Yeah, she sent me an email. She's not feeling well today. Can I get you to straighten your arm out? Right here. I'm a little bit more center. A little bit more center.
It's gonna take a minute.
Right? You're not going to hear anything. You're not going to hear anything yet. You're going to inflate your cuff. Put that on the artery. Yep. Inflate. Deflate. And listen. Keep opening. Did you
I
hear?
got the last number, but not the first.
But did you hear any thumps?
Yeah. Oh,
That's
sorry.
all that I care about today. Did you hear thumps?
Yeah, I
That's
got
all
the
I
end, but
care
not
about.
the first one. Yeah, good. Thank you.
You find it?
Sorry. Oh, it's fine.
Let me see if I can help.
I did. Yeah, I did. So no, it's.
Yeah, hers is here, but hers is buried very deep. It's not, yeah, it's not that you're not getting it. It's that hers is very, very, she's got a tendon that runs. I can feel her tendon. Her tendon runs right over. So yeah, just put your stethoscope right here. This is where it's at, but put your stethoscope right there. Okay, so you're going to be out for just a minute. But you're going to be the patient next. Did you hear thumps? That's all I care about right now is just hearing thumps. Now remember I said it's going to take about 45 blood pressures before you start to narrow this in. So keep that in mind. Okay. So you are going to go take her blood pressure and then you're going to have a seat and she's going to take yours. Over here, that way you've got somewhere to support the arm. You don't find the artery with this stuff because you're not going to be able to hear it. You have to feel it with your fingers. So you can lay the cuff on the arm, find the artery, and then line that arrow up.
not. It's not easy. It's okay. You can try again. I know. I'm going to try again.
Were you able to hear it?
Finally.
Good. So, let me see here. Yep, so you're gonna be taking her blood pressure
Got
in
it.
just a minute. And then, she's gonna take her, yep, she'll be the,
100
Shaker.
for 8.
okay. Right. So now you're gonna rotate over there, you're gonna take hers.
Okay.
And then she's gonna sit down and you'll take hers.
Don't forget your.
You've already taken hers, haven't you?
I've
Okay,
taken yours too.
all right, so, you guys work together then.
Okay. You're right? Okay. Yeah. Do you want to go first?
Basically, you have to take everyone's blood pressure today. See here, have you taken hers yet? Go ahead and take hers. Okay, so you can go work with her.
Oh, you're okay.
It's not closed all the way.
This-
Yep. Other way. Yeah, turn it righty tighty. No, no, no. You just went to the left. It's got to go to the right. There you go. There you go.
These aren't even going in my ears. Yeah, I think it's just in my ears. I'm really trying not to get aggravated because I'm just having a hard time.
Okay,
doing
that's
this.
okay. That's all right. Let me see. Let's see here. Yeah, they look like they're positioned right. So try to put these in your ears. And then hold it here. So you're gonna have to get in closer. There you go. Now hold that there. Hold that there. I'm gonna do this part and you just listen. You didn't hear anything at all? Okay. Is that a new stethoscope?
I got it probably like a couple days before the first class.
Okay, so it's new. Can you hear it when you tap on it? Can you hear that? Okay. Snug on your arm. It is better if we have this a little bit higher, because we don't want that stethoscope to be tucked under. No, you're going to be down here. You don't want the stethoscope under.
Slow, but my pressure is always nowhere. Don't worry.
Did you hear any thumps? Okay, good. Very good. All right. Don't worry about putting the numbers together right now. I just need you to hear the thumps. All right. So, okay. So go ahead and change partners. Find somebody who you have not taken their blood pressure on. Oh. Yeah, it's so hard when we have an odd number.
like 111 and it's about like 16.
Okay, you guys want to switch? Make sure the arm is popped out. Yeah, this is hard to find. Right here. Right there, but it is kind of hard to find. Is she pressing as hard as I did? No. Okay, press a little harder. Just little thumps under the fingers.
Do you need to check mine? No. So, go down. Mikhail. Okay, so you need to check mine. Okay. Which side do you want to do?
I'm not sure.
Okay. None of you are going to be accurate today. So I'm not worried about any of the blood pressure readings you got because you're not accurate. Remember I said it's going to take about 45 blood pressures to be accurate. I'm not worried about your numbers today. But did everybody hear at least one good set of thumps? So do you know what you're listening for? Okay. All right, that's the big thing, because now you can go home and practice if you know what you're listening for. A lot of this is going to boil down to you working on your technique, because at first you're going to feel like you need another hand. There just aren't enough hands, right? So that's a lot of what the practice is for, is to work on your technique so that you don't feel so fumbly with all of this, because there's a lot going on. Practice finding the artery on people at home, because in here I've only got 5 of you today. Normally I have, usually between 12 and 15 people. So normally there's a lot of opportunity for finding, but like 3 of you are hard to find. So that makes it, a really, really difficult in here. So you're definitely going to have to practice this outside. Valentina, I need your email address, because apparently our emails are not going through to you. So have you gotten any of our emails? Okay. So it's used for higher pitch sounds, so breast sounds, some heart sounds, and on kids. Can you write it for me? And then I also need Nerlene. I need your email address too, because you're not getting our emails either. So can you write it on here? Because I want to make sure that you guys get your emails. So this is what we have.
Oh, yeah, because the GA.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's important.
And the season.
Yeah, see, that's what I have.
Yeah.
That's correct?
No. Okay.
Oh, FR. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I'll get those over to my assistant so we can make sure that you guys get your emails. All right. So here's your review sheets for today. And do you guys have any questions about what we went over in class today? No? All right. You are free to go. Thank you so much. It was a good class. We are almost done with principles on the back wall. Look how much you've learned in 3 classes. We're well on our way. All right. So I will see you guys on Wednesday at 9. See here. Hello to everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Hello. Okay, I don't see any. Oh, Dahlia says I still don't get to see how to make my ear tips face forward. You just turn the whole thing. So Dahlia, if you're still watching, let me come over here. Okay. Let me come over where you can see me. See how the ear tips have a slight curve to them? You may have to adjust them. Some of them might be straight. See how those are straight? you guys see? Yeah. See how those are straight? Some of them you actually have to, you hold down here and you turn your ear tips. Some of them are already preset, depending on the ones that you have. But do you see how these are now pointing in a certain direction? I can point them that way, or I can turn the whole thing around and point them that way. You want to make sure that these are facing forward or away from you when you put them in your ears. Okay. So you just, if you've got them in like this, where they're facing you, you just take them out, flip the whole thing around, just flip it around so they're facing away from you. Okay. All right. That looks like it was the only question that I had for today. Oh, good, Dahlia. I hope that helps. Let me know if that still helps. All right. So for those of you who are joining us from YouTube world, you can download the review sheets on our course. It's courses.foryourcna.com. So courses.foryourcna.com. The very first lesson is the live classroom feed. The review sheet is there for you for today's class. So you can download that same review sheet that we're using in class for my classroom students. You have access to that as well. All right, so I hope to see you guys all on Wednesday. We're going to cover some new skills on Wednesday. And if you have any questions, bring them to class. We'll be live from 9 to 1 on Wednesday. Let me just get this put away here. All right, so until next time, guys, happy caregiving. Bye.